ริ่มกันเถอะโอ้ยวันนี้จ้าสวัสดีคนนะคะเราเข้าสู่สตรีมของ CallistoSoCool วันนี้วันนี้เราก็กลับมากับการอ่าน Harry Potter กันอีกแล้วนะคะกับ Reading with Callisto ในเอพิโซดที่เท่าไหร่วะเอพิโซดที่4แล้วนะคะหลังจากที่เราอ่านมาทั้งหมด9 chapter นะคะเราก็จะมาอ่าน chapter ที่10 11 12กันต่อนะคะวันนี้ตั้งใจว่าจะเอาให้แค่3 chapter นี่แหละเพราะว่าคิดว่าถ้านอกจากนี้คิดว่าคอฉันน่าจะไม่ไหวนะคะเพราะรู้สึกว่าช่วงนี้เสียงฉันมันค่อนข้างที่จะยังไงอะมันค่อนข้างที่จะแบบว่าไม่ค่อยเสถียรเท่าไหร่เนาะก็ก่อนที่จะเริ่มอ่านเรามาทวนกันดีกว่านะคะว่าแพทเทิร์นรายการนี้จะเป็นยังไงบ้างนะคะก็เราเนี่ยก็จะอ่าน chapter 1 chapter นั้นๆนะคะเป็นภาษาอังกฤษนะแล้วพอเราอ่านจบเนี่ยเราก็จะแปลความหมายสรุปความนั่นแหละเป็นภาษาไทยนะแล้วก็จะมีการอาจจะใช้ฟีดแบ็กนิดนึงแล้วก็พักสักครู่ก่อนที่จะเริ่มอ่าน chapter ต่อไปนะคะผมเหนื่อยหน่อยฮะสวัสดีคุณนายใครจะเข้าสู่สตรีมของ CallistoSoCool วันนี้นะเว้ยเราเห็นคุณนายที่ว่าคุณนายทำเพลงAshes on Fire ใช่ไหมจำชื่อเพลงไม่ได้อะที่ว่าคุณนายโพสต์ลง Discord อันนั้นดีมากเลยเราชอบมากนะคะนะวันนี้เรามาตรงเวลามากตรงเวลาแบบตรงเวลาที่สุดอะเนาะเริ่มแบบ3 ทุ่มเป๊ะๆเลยไม่รวมอินโทรนะคะนะถ้าอย่างนั้นเราก็มาเริ่มอ่านกันเลยดีไหมนะคือฉันเริ่มเร็วฉันได้อ่านแบบค่อยๆแต่ว่าฉันได้ฟีดแบ็กมาว่าฉันควรจะอ่านให้ช้ากว่านี้แล้วก็แบบว่าโอเคมันเราปรับได้นะคะเนาะก็ถ้าอย่างนั้นก็เรามาเริ่มกันเลยดีกว่านะคะกับ chapter ที่10ที่มีชื่อบทว่า Halloween นะคะโอเคนะแล้วคือตอนนี้สภาพตอนนี้ฉันใส่แว่นอ่านเหมือนคนแก่อะแต่มันคือแว่นกองแสงไงฉันใส่แว่นกองแสงฉันน่าเหมือนคนเป็นเหมือนเป็นคนแบบเป็นคนแก่อ่านนะคะแต่คือจริงๆคือแว่นก็แค่แว่นกองแสงนั่นแหละนะมาเราเริ่มอ่านกันเลยดีกว่านะคะลืมบอกไปนะคะว่าถ้าสมมติว่าในระหว่างที่เราอ่านแล้วมีช่องแชทเราพิมพ์คอมเมนต์มาแล้วเราไม่ได้อ่านคือเราไม่ได้เมินนะคะคือเรากำลังอ่านอยู่แล้วเราแบบว่าถ้าเราแบบว่าเบรกด้วยการอ่านคอมเมนต์อาจจะหมดฟิลนะคะด้วยความที่อย่างที่บอกนะว่าซีรีส์เนี้ยมันเป็นแบบว่าการทำเหมือน storytelling เหมือนเล่านิทานนั่นแหละประมาณนั้นแล้วก็ไม่อยากจะขัดฟิลของผู้ชมนะคะก็ไว้ถ้าใครคอมเมนต์อะไรช่องแชทมาเดี๋ยวเราก็จะอ่านทีเดียวหลังที่เราอ่านชัปเตอร์นั้นจบนะคะก็เพื่อไม่ให้เป็นการเสียเวลานะคะเราเริ่มต่อที่ chapter 10 กันดีกว่านะคะมา chapter 10 Halloween Malfoy couldn't believe his eyes when he saw that Harry and Ron were still at Hogwarts next day, looking tired but perfectly cheerful. Indeed, by the next morning, Harry and Ron thought that meeting the three-headed dog had been an excellent adventure, and they were quite keen to have another one. In the meantime, Harry filled Ron in about the package that seemed to have been moved from Gringotts to Hogwarts, and they spent a lot of time wondering what could possibly need such heavy protection.It's either really valuable or really dangerous, said Ron. Or both, said Harry. But as all they knew for sure about the mysterious object was that it was about 2 inches long, they didn't have much chance of guessing what it was without further clues. Neither Neville or Hermione showed the slightest interest in what lay underneath the dog and the trapdoor. All Neville cared about was never going near the dog again.Hermione was now refusing to speak to Harry and Ron, but she was such a bossy know-it-all that they saw this as an added bonus. All they really wanted now was a way of getting back at Malfoy, and to their great delight, just such a thing arrived with the post about a week later. As the owls flooded into the great hall as usual, everyone's attention was caught at once by a long thin package carried by 6 large screech owls.Harry was just as interested as everyone else to see what was in this large parcel, and was amazed when the owl soared down and dropped it right in front of him, knocking his bacon to the floor. They had hardly fluttered out the way when another owl dropped a letter on the top of the parcel. Harry ripped open the letter first, which was lucky because it said, "Do not open the parcel at the table.It contains your new Nimbus 2000, but I don't want everybody knowing you've got a broomstick or they'll all want one." Oliver Wood will meet you tonight on the Quidditch pitch at 7 o'clock for your first training session. Signed, Professor Minerva McGonagall. Harry had difficulty hiding his glee as he handed the note to Ron to read. A Nimbus 2000, Ron moaned enviously. I've never even touched one. They left the hall quickly, wanting to unwrap the broomstick in private before their first lesson, but halfway across the entrance hall, they found the way upstairs barred by Crabbe and Goyle. Malfoy seized the package from Harry and felt it. That's a broomstick, he said, throwing it back to Harry with a mixture of jealousy and spite on his face. You'll be for it in this time, Potter. First years aren't allowed them. Ron couldn't resist it. It's not any old broomstick, he said. It's a Nimbus 2000. What did you say you've got at home, Malfoy? A Comet 260? Ron grinned at Harry. Comets look flashy, but they're not in the same league as the Nimbus. What would you know about it, Weasley? You couldn't afford half the handle. Malfoy snapped back. I suppose you and your brothers have to save up twig by twig. Before Ron could answer, Professor Flitwick appeared at Malfoy's elbow. Not arguing, I hope, boys? He squeaked. Potter's been sent a broomstick, Professor, said Malfoy quickly. Yes, that's right, said Professor Flitwick, beaming at Harry. Professor McGonagall told me all about the special circumstances. Potter, and what model is it? A Nimbus 2000, sir, said Harry, fighting not to laugh at the look of horror on Malfoy's face. And it's really thanks to Malfoy here that I got it, he added. Harry and Ron headed upstairs, smothering their laughter at Malfoy's obvious rage and confusion. Well, it's true, Harry shuddered as they reached the top of the marble staircase. If he hadn't stolen Neville's Remembrall, I wouldn't be in the team. So I suppose you think that's a reward for breaking rules? Came an angry voice from just behind them. Hermione was stomping up the stairs, looking disapprovingly at the package in Harry's hand. I thought you weren't speaking to us, said Harry. Yes, don't stop now, said Ron. It's doing us so much good. Hermione marched away with her nose in the air. Harry had a lot of trouble keeping his mind on his lessons that day. It kept wandering up to the dormitory, where his new broomstick was lying under his bed, or straying off to the Quidditch pitch where he'd be learning to play that night. He bolted his dinner that evening without noticing what he was eating, and then rushed upstairs, with Ron to unwrap the Nimbus 2000 at last. Wow, Ron sighed, as the broomstick rolled onto Harry's bedspread. Even Harry, who knew nothing about the different broom, thought it looked wonderful, sleek and shiny, with a mahogany handle. It had a long tail of neat, straight twigs, and Nimbus 2000 written in gold near the top. As 7 o'clock drew nearer, Harry left the castle and set off towards the Quidditch pitch in the dusk. He had never been inside the stadium before. Hundreds of seats were raised in stands around the pitch so that the spectators were high enough to see what was going on. At either end of the pitch were 3 golden poles with hoops on the end. They reminded Harry of the little plastic sticks smuggled children blew bubbles through, except that they were 50 feet high. Too eager to fly and to wait for wood, Harry mounted his broomstick and kicked off from the ground. What a feeling! He swooped in and out of goal posts and then sped up down the pitch. The Nimbus 2000 turned whenever he wanted at his slightest touch. Hey, Potter, calm down! Oliver Wood had arrived. He was carrying a large wooden crate under his arm. Harry landed next to him. Very nice, said Wood, his eyes glinting. I see what McGonagall meant. You really are a natural. I'm just going to teach you the rules this evening. Then you'll be joining team practice 3 times a week. He opened the crate. Inside were 4 different sized balls. Right, said Wood. Now, Quidditch is easy enough to understand, even if it's not too easy to play. There are 7 players on each side. 3 of them are called chasers. 3 chasers, Harry repeated, as Wood took out a bright red ball about the size of a football. This ball is called the quaffle, said Wood. The chasers throw the quaffle to each other and try to get it through one of the hoops to score a goal. 10 points every time the quaffle goes through one of the hoops. Follow me? The chasers throw quaffle and put it through the hoops to score. Harry recited, so that's sort of like basketball on broomstick with 6 hoops, isn't it? What's basketball? Said Wood curiously. Never mind, said Harry quickly. Now, there's another player on each side who's called the keeper. I'm the keeper for Gryffindor. I have to fly around our hoops and stop the other team from scoring. 3 chasers, 1 keeper, said Harry, who was determined to remember it all. And they play with the quaffle? Okay, got that. So what they're for? He pointed at the 3 balls left inside the box. I'll show you now, said Wood. Take this. He handed Harry a small club, a bit like a rounder's bat. I'm going to show you what the bludgers do, Wood said. These 2 are the bludgers. He showed Harry 2 identical balls, jet black and slightly smaller than the red quaffle. Harry noticed that they seemed to be straining to escape the straps holding them inside the box. Stand back, Wood warned Harry. He bent down and freed one of the bludgers. At once, the black ball rose high in the air and then pelted straight at Harry's face. Harry swung at it with the blade to stop it breaking his nose and send it zigzagging away into the air. It zoomed around their heads and then shot at Wood, who dived on top of it and managed to pin it to the ground. See? Wood panted, forcing the struggling bludger back into the crate and strapping it down safely. The bludgers rocket around trying to knock players off the brooms. That's why you have 2 beaters on each team. The Weasley twins are ours. It's your job to protect their side from the bludgers and try to knock them towards the other stream. So, think you've got all that? 3 chasers try to score with the quaffle, the keeper guards the goalpost, the beaters keep the bludgers away from their team. Harry reeled off. Very good, said Wolf. Have the bludgers ever killed anyone? Harry asked, hoping he sounded offhand. Never at Hogwarts. We've had a couple of broken jaws, but nothing worse than that. Now, the last member of the team is the Seeker. That's you. And you don't have to worry about the quaffle or the bludgers, unless they crack my head open. Don't worry, the Weasleys are more than a match for the bludgers. I mean, they're like a pair of human bludgers themselves. Wood reached into the crate and took out the 4th and the last ball. Compared with the quaffle and the bludgers, it was tiny, about the size of a large walnut. It was bright gold and had little fluttering silver wings. This, said Wood, is the golden snitch, and it's the most important ball of the lot. It's very hard to catch, because it's so fast and difficult to see. It's the Seeker's job to catch it. You've got to weave in and out of the chasers, beaters, bludgers, and quaffles to get it, before the other team's Seeker, because whichever Seeker catches the snitch wins his team an extra 150 points, so they nearly always win. That's why Seekers get fouled so much. A game of Quidditch only ends when the snitch is caught, so it can go on for ages. I think the record is 3 months. They had to keep bringing in non-substitutes so the players could get some sleep. Well, that's it. Any question? Harry shook his head. He understood what he had to do. Alright. It was it doing what it was going to be a problem. We won't practice with the snitch yet, said Wood, carefully shutting it back inside the crate. It's too dark. We might lose it. Let's try you on with a few of these. He pulled the bag of ordinary golf balls out of his pockets, and a few minutes later, he and Harry were up in the air, Wood throwing the golf balls as hard as he could in every direction for Harry to catch. Harry didn't miss a single one, and Wood was delighted. After half an hour, night had really fallen and they couldn't carry on. That Quidditch Cup will have our name on it this year, said Wood happily, as they trudged back up to the castle. I wouldn't be surprised if you turned out better than Charlie Weasley, and you could have a play for England if he had gone off chasing dragons. Perhaps it was because he was now too busy with Quidditch practice 3 evenings a week on top of all his homework, but Harry could hardly believe when he realized that he'd already been at Hogwarts 2 months. The castle felt more like home than Privet Drive had ever done. His lessons, too, were becoming more and more interesting now that they had mastered the basics. On Halloween morning, they woke to delicious smells of baking pumpkin wafting through the corridors. Even better, Professor Flitwick announced in charms that he thought they were ready to start making objects fly, something they had been dying to try since they'd seen him make Neville's toad zoom around the classroom. Professor Flitwick put the class into pairs of practice. Harry's partner was Seamus Finnegan, which was a relief because Neville had been trying to catch his eye. Ron, however, was to be working with Hermione Granger. It was hard to tell whether Ron or Hermione was angry about this. She hadn't spoken to either of them since the day Harry's broomstick had arrived. Now, don't forget that nice wrist movement. We've been practicing. Squeaked Professor Flitwick, perched on top of his pile of books as usual. Swish and flick. Remember, swish and flick. And saying the magic words properly is very important. Do never forget Resort Barufio, who said S instead of F and found himself on the floor with a buffalo on his chest. It was very difficult. Harry and Sam switched and flicked, but the feather that was supposed to be sending skyward just lay on the desktop. Samus got so impatient that he prodded with his wand and set fire to it. Harry had to put it out with his hat. Ron at the next table wasn't having much more luck. Wingardium Leviosa, he shouted, waving his long arms like a windmill. You're saying it wrong, Harry heard Hermione snap. It's Wingardium Leviosa. Made the guard nice and long. You do it then, if you're so clever, Ron snarled. Hermione rolled up the sleeves of her gown, flicked her wand, and said, Wingardium Leviosa. Their feathers rose up to the decks and hovered about 4 feet above their heads. Okay, well done, cried Professor Flitwick, clapping. Everyone see here, Miss Granger's done it. Ron was in a very bad temper by the end of the class. It's no wonder no one can stand her, he said to Harry as they pushed their way into the crowded corridor. She's a nightmare, honestly. Someone knocked into Harry as they hurried past him. It was Hermione. Harry caught a glimpse of her face and was startled to see that she was in tears. I think she hurt you. So? Said Ron, but he looked a bit uncomfortable. She must have noticed she's got no friend. Hermione didn't turn up for the next class and wasn't seen all afternoon. On their way down to the Great Hall for the Halloween feast, Harry and Ron overheard Parvati Patil telling her friend Lavender that Hermione was crying in the girls' toilet and wanted to be left alone. Ron looked still more upward at this, but a moment later they had entered the Great Hall, where the Halloween decorations were put Hermione out of their minds. 1,000 live bats fluttered from the walls and ceiling, while 1,000 more swooped over the tables in low black clouds, making the candles in the pumpkin stutter. The feast appeared suddenly on the golden plates, as it had started an off-term banquet. Harry was just helping himself to a jagged potato when Professor Quirrell came sprinting into the hall, his turban askew and terror on his face. Everyone stared as he reached Professor Dumbledore's chair, slumped against the table, and gasped, "Troll, in the dungeons! Thought you ought to know." He then sank on the floor in the deep vent. There was an uproar. It took several purple firecrackers exploding from the end of Professor Dumbledore's wand to bring silence. Prefects, he rumbled, lead your house back to the dormitories immediately. Percy was in his element. Follow me. Stick together first year. No need to fear the troll if you follow my orders. Stay close behind me. Now. Make way. First year's coming through. Excuse me, I'm a prefect. How could a troll get in? Harry asked as they climbed the stairs. Don't ask me. They're supposed to be really stupid, said Ron. Maybe Peeves let it in for a Halloween joke. They passed different groups of people hurrying in different directions as they jostled their way through a crowd of confused Hufflepuff. Harry suddenly grabbed Ron's arm. I've just thought, Hermione, what about her? She doesn't know about the troll. Ron bit his lip. Oh, all right, he snapped, but Percy better not see us. Ducking down, they joined the Hufflepuffs going the other way, slipped down the deserted side of the corridor and hurried off toward the girls' toilet. They had just turned the corner when they heard quick footsteps from behind them. Percy! Hissed Ron, pulled Harry behind a large stone griffin. Peering around it, however, they saw not Percy, but Snape. He crossed the corridor and disappeared from view. What's he doing? Harry whispered. Why isn't he down in the dungeons with the rest of the teachers? Search me. Quietly as possible, they crept along the next corridor after Snape's fading footstep. He's heading for the 3rd floor, Harry said, but Ron held up his hand. Can you smell something? Harry sniffed. A foul stench reached his nostril, a mixture of old socks and the kind of public toilet no one seems to clean. And they heard it, a low grunting and a shuffling footfalls of gigantic feet. Ron pointed. At the end of the passage to the left, something huge was moving towards them. They shrank into the shadows and watched it as it emerged into a patch of moonlight. It was a horrible sight. 12 feet tall, its skin was dull, granite gray, its great lumpy body like a boulder with its small bald head perched on top like a coconut. It had short legs thick as tree trunks with flat horny feet. The smell coming from it was incredible. It was holding a huge wooden club which dragged along the floor because its arms were so long. The troll stopped next to a doorway and peered inside. It waggled its long ears, making up its tiny mind, then slouched slowly into the room. The key's in the lock, Harry muttered. We could lock it in. Good idea, said Ron nervously. They edged towards the open door, mouths dry, praying the troll wasn't about to come out of it. With one great leap, Harry managed to grab the key, slam the door and lock it. Yes! Flushed with their victory, they started to run back up the passage, but as they reached the corner they heard something that made their hearts stop. A high, petrified scream, and it was coming from the chamber they just locked up. Oh no, said Ron, pale as the bloody baron. It's the girls' toilet, Harry gasped. Hermione, they said together. It was the last thing they wanted to do, but what choice did they have? Wheeling around as they sprinted back to the door and turned the key. Fumbling in their panic, Harry pulled the door open. They ran inside. Hermione Granger was shrinking against the wall opposite, looking as if she was about to faint. The troll was advancing on her, knocking the things off the walls as it went. Confused, Harry said desperately to Ron, and seizing a tap he threw it as hard as he could against the wall. The troll stopped a few feet from Hermione. It lumbered around, blinking stupidly to see what had made the noise. Its mean little eyes saw Harry. It hesitated, then made for him instead, lifting its club as it went. Oi, pea-brain, yelled Ron from the other side of the chamber, and he threw a metal pipe at it. The troll didn't even seem to notice the pipe hitting its shoulder, but it heard the yell, and paused again, turning its ugly snout towards Ron instead, giving Harry time to run around it. Come on, run, run! Harry yelled at Hermione, trying to pull her towards the door, but she couldn't move. She was still flat against the wall, her mouth open with terror. The shouting and the echoes seemed to be driving the troll berserk. It roared again and started towards Ron, who was nearest and had no way to escape. Harry then did something that was both very brave and very stupid. He took a great running jump and managed to fasten his arms around the troll's neck from behind. The troll couldn't feel Harry hanging there, but even the troll would notice if you stick a long bit of wood up his nose. And Harry's wand had still been in his hand when he jumped. It had gone straight up into one of the troll's nostrils. Howling with pain, the troll twisted and failed its club, with Harry's clinging on for dear life. Any second, the troll was going to rip him off and catch him on a terrible blow with a club. Hermione had sunk to the floor in fright. Ron pulled out his own wand, not knowing what he was going to do. He heard himself cry the first spell that came into his head, Wingardium Leviosa. The club flew suddenly out of the troll's hand, rose high up into the air, and turned slowly over, and dropped with a sickening crack onto its owner's head. The troll then swayed on the spot and fell flat on his face, with a thud that made the whole room tremble. Harry got to his feet. He was shaking out for breath. Ron was standing there with his wand still raised, staring at what he had done. It was Hermione who spoke first. Is it dead? I don't think so, said Harry. I think it's just been knocked out. He bent down and pulled his wand out of the troll's nose. It was covered in what looked like lumpy gray glue. Ugh, troll boogies. He wiped it on the troll's trousers. A sudden slamming and loud footstep made the three of them look up. They hadn't realized what a racket they had been making, but of course, someone downstairs might have heard the crashes and the troll's roars. A moment later, Professor McGonagall had come bursting into the room, closely followed by Snape, with Quirrell bringing up the rear. Quirrell took one look at the troll, let out a faint whimper, and sat quickly down on the toilet, clutching his heart. Snape bent over the troll. Professor McGonagall was looking at Ron and Harry. Harry had never seen her look so angry. Her lips were white. Hopes of winning 50 points for Gryffindor faded quickly from Harry's mind. What on earth were you thinking of? Said Professor McGonagall with cold fury in her voice. Harry looked at Ron, who was still standing with his wand in the air. You're lucky you weren't killed. Why aren't you in your dormitory? Snape gave Harry a swift, piercing look. Harry looked at the floor. He wished Ron would put his wand down. There was a small voice came from the shadows. Please, Professor McGonagall, they were looking for me. Miss Granger! Hermione had managed to get her onto her feet at last. I went looking for the troll because I thought I could deal with it on my own, because I read all about them. Ron dropped his wand. Hermione Granger, telling a downright lie to a teacher? If they hadn't found me, I'd be dead now. Harry stuck his wand up his nose and Ron dug it out with his own club. They didn't have time to come fetch anyone. It was about to finish me off when they arrived. Harry and Ron tried to look as though this story wasn't new to them. Well, in that case, said Professor McGonagall, staring at the three of them, Miss Granger, you foolish girl. How could you think you're tackling a mountain troll on your own? Hermione hung her head. Harry was speechless. Hermione was the last person to do anything against the rule, and here she was, pretending she had to get them out of trouble. It was as if Snape had started handing out sweets. Miss Granger, 5 points will be taken from Gryffindor for this, said Professor McGonagall. I'm very disappointed in you. If you're not hurt at all, you'd better get off to Gryffindor Tower. Students are finishing their feast in their house. Hermione left. Professor McGonagall turned to Harry and Ron. Well, I still say you were lucky, but not many first year could have taken a full-grown mountain troll. You each win Gryffindor 5 points. Professor McGonagall will be informed of this. You may go. They hurried out of the chamber and didn't speak at all until they had climbed 2 floors up. It was a relief to be away from the smell of troll, quite apart of anything else. We should have got more than 10 points, Ron grumbled. 5, you mean, once she's taken off Hermione's. Good for her to get us out of trouble like that, Ron admitted. Mind you, we did save her. She might not have needed saving if we hadn't locked the thing with her, Harry reminded him. They had reached the portrait of Fat Lady. Pig Snout, they said and entered. The common room was packed and noisy. Everyone was eating the food that had been sent up. Hermione, however, stood alone by the door, waiting for them. There was a very embarrassed pause. Then, none of them looking at each other, they all said thanks and hurried off to get plates. But from that moment on, Hermione Granger became their friend. There are some things you can share without ending up liking each other, and knocking out a 12-foot mountain troll is one of them. แล้วก็จบไปแล้วนะคะสำหรับ chapter 10 หรือว่า Halloween นั่นเองนะคะก็chapter นี้ก็ไม่ได้ถือว่าเยอะเนื้อหาเยอะมากนะคะก็ประมาณนั้นนะสวัสดีคุณคลาวเอสครอนใครจะเข้าสู่ซีนของ CallistoSoCool ในวันนี้นะคะวันนี้ไลฟ์อ่านนิยายต้องรอให้อ่านจบก่อนนะถึงจะได้ฟังสู่ภาษาไทยจากคอมเมนต์ใช่ค่ะขอบคุณคุณคลาวที่สรุปให้ฟังนะคะล่าสุดระหว่างฟังผมแชทกับเพื่อนอยู่โอเคเลยค่ะนะคะงั้นเราก็มาสรุปกันดีกว่านะคะว่ามันเกิดอะไรขึ้นบ้างใน chapter ที่10นี้นะก็หลังจากที่แฮร์รี่แอนด์เดอะแก๊งนะคะได้ไปบุกโรงเรียนตอนกลางคืนแล้วก็รอดตายมาอย่างปาฏิหาริย์นะคะลุสก็มีความแบบว่ามัลฟอยที่เป็นคนเหมือนไปฟ้องพาโลเองเนี่ยก็แปลกใจว่าเฮ้ยทำไมอีพวกนี้มันอยู่ได้วะสักพักหนึ่งตอนนั้นเป็นช่วงกำลังกินข้าวตอนเช้าอยู่นะก็มีน้องคู่ก็มาส่งของปกติจดหมายปกตินั่นแหละสักพักหนึ่งก็มีพัสดุอันนึงที่แปลกตามากเป็นพัสดุที่ใหญ่และยาวมากทำไมสับแปลกจังวะเป็นพัสดุที่ใหญ่และยาวซึ่งต้องใช้นกฮูกถึง6ตัวในการคาบมาส่งที่โต๊ะแฮร์รี่นะคะซึ่งแฮร์รี่เนี่ยก็กำลังจะแกะแหละแต่ก็ว่ามีจดหมายฉบับหนึ่งหล่นมาใส่มือแฮร์รี่ก่อนและแฮร์รี่ก็รู้สึกว่าดีใจที่ได้หยิบอ่านก่อนเพราะว่าในจดหมายเนี่ยเป็นจดหมายที่มาจากศาสตราจารย์มักกนากันที่บอกว่าห้ามเปิดสิ่งนี้ที่โต๊ะกินเด็ดขาดให้เปิดที่อื่นนี่คือไม้กวาดนิมบัสรุ่น 2000 ที่ฉันออกเงินซื้อให้อะไรอย่างนี้นะประมาณนั้นเสร็จแล้วก็แฮร์รี่กับรอนก็ดีใจมากที่ได้เห็นอะไรได้ของฟรีอะไรอย่างนี้เนาะพอแฮร์รี่กับรอนก็แบบว่าจะรีบเอาไม้กวาดไปเปิดที่ห้องตัวเองอะไรอย่างเงี้ยระหว่างทางดันนะครับไปเจอกับมัลฟอยค่ะเดินมาเจอพอดีก็ถามว่านี่คืออะไรเอาอะไรมาแล้วรอนก็เลยโอ้อวดไปว่านี่อันนี้คือนี่ไงไม้กวาดนิมบัสรุ่น 2000 เป็นไม้กวาดรุ่นแบบล่าสุดที่แบบว่าแพงแล้วก็มีคนอยากได้เยอะมากของนายเป็นแค่นั้นนะคอมเมต260หรอไว้กากอะไรเงี้ยประมาณนั้นแล้วมอลฟอยก็เลยเหมือนพูดประมาณเหมือนพยายามจะทำตัวข่มอะประมาณว่าแต่นักเรียนปี 1เขาห้ามมีไม้กวาดไม่ใช่หรอพูดไปพูดมาอยู่ดีศาสตราจารย์ฟิตวิกที่เป็นคนสอนวิชาคาถาก็เหมือนโผล่มาก็ถามว่าไม่ทะเลาะอะไรกันหรือเปล่ามอลฟอยก็มีความพยายามฟ้องขู่ว่าไอ้แฮร์รี่มันได้ไม้กวาดมาแต่ว่ากฎมันไม่ได้แต่ศาสตราจารย์ฟิตวิกก็บอกไปว่ามาจากศาสตราจารย์มักกนากันบอกฉันแล้วว่าแฮร์รี่เขาได้มันเป็นกรณีพิเศษอะไรอย่างเงี้ยมัลฟอยก็หน้าเหวอไปว่าอ้าวสัตว์กูจะนี่มันไม่สึกตอดเฉยเลยนะคะเสร็จแล้วแฮร์รี่กับรอนเนี่ยก็ขึ้นห้องมาแล้วเขาก็แกะไม้กวาดดูแล้วก็ชื่นชมไม้กวาดว่าดีมากนะคะแล้วก็แฮร์รี่เนี่ยเนื้อความในจดหมายเนี่ยก็บอกด้วยว่าแฮร์รี่เนี่ยจะต้องไป ไปเรียนรู้วิชาศาสตร์การเล่นควิดดิชกับโอลิเวอร์วูดซึ่งโอลิเวอร์วูดเนี่ยเป็นกัปตันทีมควิดดิชของบ้านกริฟฟินดอร์นะคะต้องไปตอนทุ่มหนึ่งนะคือทำไมเขาไปซ้อมกันดึกจังเลยเนาะพอเวลาผ่านไปประมาณทุ่มหนึ่งใช่ไหมแฮร์รี่ก็ออกนอกปราสาทไปที่สนามควิดดิชนะแล้วก็สักพักด้วยความที่แฮร์รี่เบื่อที่ไม่รู้ว่าต้องทำอะไรก็เลยเอาไม้กวาดมาบินเล่นก่อนนะแฮร์รี่ก็บอกรู้สึกแบบรู้สึกสบายมากสักพักหนึ่งโอลิเวอร์วูดก็มาเขาก็บอกชื่นชมแฮร์รี่ว่าแฮร์รี่เนี่ยเก่งจริงศาสตราจารย์มากก็ในการดูคนถูกประมาณนี้นะเสร็จแล้วโอลิเวอร์วูดเนี่ยก็มีความแบบสอนแฮร์รี่ว่าควิดดิชมันเล่นยังไงมีผู้เล่นกี่คนอะไรอย่างเงี้ยซึ่งถ้าเราอธิบายกฎก็อาจจะนานแต่จริงก็พูดได้แหละก็ควิดดิชเนี่ย1ทีมเนี่ยจะมีทั้งหมด7คนก็จะแบ่งเป็นเชเซอร์3คนอะไรวะเชเซอร์3คนคีปเปอร์1คนอะไรอีกวะแป๊บนึงขอเนี้ยเปิดดูก่อนนะฉันลืมไปแล้วว่าเชเซอร์3คนคีปเปอร์1คนแล้วก็อยู่ไหนวะโอเคสรุปนะคะการเล่นควิดดิชเนี่ยก็คือจะมีเชเซอร์3คนคีปเปอร์1คนบีเตอร์2คนแล้วก็ซีเกอร์1คนเชเซอร์เนี่ยจะทำหน้าที่ในการตีลูกควาฟเฟิลเพื่อให้มันเข้าไปในห่วงของอีกฝั่งหนึ่งแล้วก็จะได้แต้มมานะคะแล้วก็จะต้องเหมือนกับว่านั่นแหละประมาณนั้นนะใช่ไหมคือฉันก็ลืมบางทีนะใช่เชเซอร์จะคว้างลูกที่คือในเกมควิดดิชเนี่ยนอกจากจะมีผู้เล่นอันนี้แล้วก็จะมีลูกบอล4ประเภทก็จะมีลูกควาฟเฟิลลูกบลัดเจอร์ลูกโกลเด้นสนิชแล้วก็อะไรนะควาฟเฟิลบลัดเจอร์โกลเด้นสนิชกับอะไรแป๊บหนึ่งคือเรื่องพวกเนี้ยฉันพอเก็ตแต่ฉันลืมแล้วไงมันมีอะไรบ้างขออนุญาตย้อนกลับไปดูก่อนนะมีควาฟเฟิลมีบลัดเจอร์ใช่ถูกแล้วจะมีลูกบอล3ประเภทนะคะแต่ว่าจะมีทั้งหมด4ลูกก็คือจะมีควาฟเฟิลนะมีควาฟเฟิลลูก1ลูกหรือเปล่าจำไม่ได้ละคือความฉันพออธิบายได้แต่คือฉันไม่รู้ข้อมูลละเอียดชัดเจนไงเพราะว่ามันจะต้องย้อนกลับไปอ่านเยอะมากนะคะก็มีลูกบอลมี3ประเภทคือควาฟเฟิลบลัดเจอร์แล้วก็โกลเด้นสนิชนะคะก็คือเชเซอร์จะมีหน้าที่ในการทำให้การพยายามยังก็ได้ให้ลูกควาฟเฟิลเนี่ยเข้าเป็นห่วงฝั่งตรงข้ามเพื่อที่จะได้แต้มขึ้นมานะคะแล้วก็ส่วนตำแหน่งคีปเปอร์เนี่ยจะเป็นคนที่คอยกันไม่ให้ลูกควาฟเฟิลหรือลูกอะไรก็ตามของฝั่งตรงข้ามเนี่ยมาเข้าโกของเราได้นะก็คือก็ตามชื่อคีปเปอร์ก็อารมณ์เหมือนผู้รักษาประตูนะครับประมาณนั้นนะแล้วก็ตำแหน่งบีเตอร์เนี่ยจะต้องตำแหน่งบีเตอร์เนี่ยจะใช้ประเภทแบบจะทำการเล่นกับลูกบลัดเจอร์ซึ่งลูกบลัดเจอร์เนี่ยจะเป็นลูกที่ค่อนข้างรุนแรงเพราะว่ามันจะบินเร็วมากแล้วก็ค่อนข้างรุนแรงฉะนั้นก็เหมือนกับว่าเป็นการเอาไปดิสแทรกฝ่ายตรงข้ามประมาณนั้นนะคะแต่ไม่รู้ว่าถ้าไอ้ลูกนั้นเข้าห่วงมันจะได้คะแนนมันน่าจะไม่ได้แล้วก็ลูก Golden Snitch เนี่ยจะเป็นลูกที่สำคัญที่สุดเลยเพราะว่าถ้าหากว่าคือลูก Golden Snitch เนี่ยต้องจับคู่กับตำแหน่ง Seeker ถ้าสมมติว่าตำแหน่ง Seeker เนี่ยสามารถจับลูก Golden Snitch ได้เนี่ยก็คือทีมฝั่งนั้นก็จะได้แต้มไปเลย150แต้มซึ่งคือถ้าคือว่าชนะเกมเลยจบเกมเลยนะคะก็ลูกGolden Snitchเนี่ยก็เป็นลูกเล็กๆคือเล็กมากแล้วก็มีปีกบินได้นะแล้วก็บินเร็วด้วยนะแฮร์รี่ก็ด้วยความที่บินเก่งก็ได้กลายเป็นซีเกอร์ไปเลยนะคะก็คือได้เป็นตำแหน่งสำคัญในทีมด้วยนะคะแฮร์รี่คงคิดในใจแล้วว่าอีเหี้ยสร้างอะไรให้กูทำไมวะนั่นแหละประมาณนั้นพอเรียนรู้ไปสักพักหนึ่งก็มีการอะไรเล็กๆน้อยๆและแฮร์รี่ก็เข้านอนนะคะแล้วก็วันต่อมาเนี่ยก็เป็นช่วงถึงวันฮาโลวีนนะโรงเรียนก็ตกแต่งแบบสวยงามมากนะคะสักพักหนึ่งตอนเย็นที่ว่าเขากำลังกินเลี้ยงฉลองกันตอนเย็นอยู่เนี่ยกลายว่าอยู่ดีศาสตราจารย์ควิเรลก็วิ่งเข้ามาในห้องแล้วก็บอกว่ามีโทรบุกอยู่ในคุกใต้ดินแล้วก็สลบลงไปทุกคนก็แตกตื่นแต่ศาสตราจารย์ดัมเบิลดอร์ก็บอกว่าให้พรีเฟกต์ทุกคนเนี่ยพานักเรียนกลับเข้าหอนอนของตัวเองนะซึ่งความเฮี้ยคืออะไรรู้ปะหอนอนของบ้านสลิธีรินน่ะอยู่ที่คุกใต้ดินซึ่งโทรอยู่ที่คุกใต้ดินคือถ้าบ้านสลิธีรินโดนลงไปข้างล่างจะเจอโทรไหมอันนี้ก็น่ากลัวอย่างหนึ่งนะคะแอบสงสารเหมือนกันนะคะถึงจะเป็นบ้านที่มีแต่คนเร็วๆเถอะแต่คนดีๆเป็นสลิธีรินก็มีนะหรือเปล่าไม่มั่นใจนะ อ่าก็นั่นแหละพอแฮร์รี่กับรอนก็กำลังจะกลับไปแหละแต่ว่าอยู่ดีๆเนี่ยเหมือนเฮอร์ไมโอนี่ก็อันนี้ไปฉันลืมเล่าเลยขออนุญาตขออนุญาตเล่าแทรกนะหลังจากที่เหตุการณ์ที่เขาเรียนเรื่องบินกันใช่ไหมแฮร์รี่เนี่ยก็ได้เข้าเรียนคลาสเรียนวิชาคาถากับ professor จากศาสตราจารย์ฟิตวิกซึ่งเขาได้เรียนคาถาทำให้สิ่งของลอยได้คือวิงการเดียมเลวิโอซานะซึ่งตอนนั้นเนี่ยเหมือนรอนเนี่ยจะไปพูดแทงใจดำเฮอร์ไมโอนี่สักอย่างนะให้เฮอร์ไมโอนี่เหมือนแบบว่าเสียใจร้องไห้แล้วก็ไม่เข้าเรียนคาบต่อๆไปอะไรอย่างนี้นะแล้วพอสักพักหนึ่งเนี่ยตัดกลับเข้ามาช่วงตัดกลับเข้ามาช่วงที่เขากินฮาโลวีนที่โทรบุกอะแฮร์รี่กับรอนก็กำลังจะกลับเข้าหอแหละแต่เพิ่งนึกได้ว่าเฮอร์ไมโอนี่เนี่ยไม่ได้อยู่กับเขาคือเฮอร์ไมโอนี่อะเฮอร์ไมโอนี่อะเหมือนไปหลบร้องไห้ในห้องน้ำหญิงซึ่งความตลกก็คือแฮร์รี่เนี่ยก็มีความเป็นห่วงไงแต่รอนก็เหมือนไม่ค่อยอยากช่วยแต่ก็ช่วยก็ได้เพราะว่าด้วยความที่แบบว่าจริงๆเฮอร์ไมโอนี่ก็แบบว่าเหมือนไอ้นี่อยู่นะก็เลยเหมือนตั้งใจจะไปช่วยแหละก็แบบว่าตีเนียนออกมาจากกลุ่มนะสักพักหนึ่งเดินไปเดินมาเหมือนได้ยินเสียงคนก็นึกว่าเพอร์ซี่แต่ว่าไม่ใช่เป็นศาสตราจารย์สเนปที่เดินผ่านไปแต่ว่าสองคนก็หลบได้ทันนะพอศาสตราจารย์สเนปหายไปก็เดินไปที่ตอนแรกกำลังจะเดินไปหามันนี่แหละแต่ว่ามีโทรโผล่มาพอดีนะแล้วมันก็กำลังเดินไปอีกฝั่งหนึ่งแฮร์รี่กับรอนเนี่ยก็เลยฉวยโอกาสนะคะเอากุญแจที่อยู่แถวนั้นเนี่ยไปล็อกประตูห้องที่โทรเดินเข้าไปซะแต่กำลังจะเดินออกมาเพิ่งนึกได้ว่าฝั่งทางเดินที่ตัวเองเพิ่งล็อกไปเนี่ยมันเป็นฝั่งที่ไปเดินห้องน้ำผู้หญิงซึ่งเฮอร์ไมโอนี่ก็กรี๊ดมาพอดี2คนก็เลยรีบปลดล็อกประตูแล้วเข้าไปก็เห็นว่าโทรแม่งจะทุบเฮอร์ไมโอนี่แล้วทั้ง2คนก็เลยมีการพยายามหลอกล่อโทรแฮร์รี่ก็ไปกระโดดกอดคอมันอะไรก็ไม่รู้และตอนนั้นเนี่ยรอนเกือบจะโดนจนมุมแต่ว่าก็ได้ใช้คาถาวิงการเดียนเลเวลซ่าที่เพิ่งเรียนมาเนี่ยสยบโทรได้ทันนะสักพักแล้วพอเสร็จปุ๊บเนี่ยศาสตราจารย์มักกนากันที่เหมือนได้ยินเสียงดังๆที่เกิดขึ้นในห้องนั้นก็มาพอดีก็แบบว่าเฮ้ยทำอะไรกันอะไรอย่างนี้แบบเฮ้ยมันอันตรายมากนะรู้ไหมอะไรอย่างเงี้ยซึ่งเฮอร์ไมโอนี่ที่จริงตอนแรกเนี่ยนั่งกรี๊ดอยู่ในมุมคนเดียวเนี่ยก็ออกตัวรับผิดเองว่าเป็นคนที่แบบว่าสยบโทรเองเพราะนึกว่าแบบว่าเป็นคนแบบว่าเหมือนล่อโทรมาอะไรอย่างเงี้ยว่าจะแบบว่าหนูคิดว่าหนูอาจจะหาว่าสยบโทรได้ค่ะเพราะว่าหนูแบบอ่านมาเยอะอะไรอย่างเงี้ยก็คือตอแหลว่ากันเถอะซึ่งแฮร์รี่ก็เราก็ตกใจมาเพราะปกติเฮอร์ไมโอนี่เป็นคนไม่ตอแหลไงแล้วศาสตราจารย์มักกนากันบอกว่าทำงี้ได้ไงเนี่ยหักคะแนนกริฟฟินดอร์5คะแนนจ้ามันอันตรายเด้อแต่ว่าถ้าไม่เป็นไรก็ดีแล้วนะคะกลับขึ้นห้องไปนะเสร็จแล้วพอเฮอร์ไมโอนี่เดินออกไปใช่ไหมตอนนั้นเนี่ยศาสตราจารย์สเนปก็อยู่ด้วยแล้วก็ทำหน้าเหมือนแบบว่าวิดีใจวิอีนี่ทำอะไรว่าสมน้ำหน้านะแล้วพอเฮอร์ไมโอนี่เดินไปใช่ไหมมันก็นากันก็บอกว่าแต่พวกเธอทำได้ก็ดีแล้วแหละฉันให้คะแนนบ้านกริฟฟินดอร์ไป10คะแนนละกันนะแล้วเดี๋ยวฉันจะแจ้งดัมเบิลดอร์ด้วยประมาณนั้นคือแบบว่าทำความดีก็เอาไปนะคะแต่คือหักไปอยู่ดีนั่นแหละเสร็จแล้วปุ๊บแฮร์รี่กับรอนเนี่ยก็กลับขึ้นห้องมาใช่ไหมแล้วก็คนพบว่าทุกคนก็กำลังกินอาหารอยู่ในห้องนั่งเล่นของบ้านตัวเองนั่นแหละและเฮอร์ไมโอนี่ก็เหมือนรออยู่ที่ประตูอะไรแบบเนี้ยทุกคนก็แบบว่าเหมือนกันกูกากาแบบว่าไม่รู้จะพูดอะไรความที่มันเพิ่งเกิดเหตุการณ์แปลกประหลาดมานะเฮอร์ไมโอนี่ก็บอกขอบคุณอะไรที่ช่วยประมาณนี้แฮร์รี่กับรอนก็ขอขอบคุณเหมือนกันแล้วก็ตั้งแต่นั้นมาทั้ง3คนนี้ก็กลายเป็นเพื่อนกันโดยปริยายเลยนะคะคือเป็นการเหมือนเรียกว่าเหตุการณ์นั้นคือทำให้ทั้ง3คนนี้เป็นเพื่อนกันเรียบร้อยนะคะก็เป็นการสืบเนื้อเรื่องดีนะคะโอเคเราขออนุญาตพักคอสักครู่ก่อนที่เราจะไป chapter ที่11กันนะคะบอกเลย chapter ที่11มันมากนะภาคมันไม่พอฉันต้องแบบมาแปลทีละอย่างนะโอเคสภาพผมช่วงนี้ไอเดียการ cover 50% ไอเดียการทำเอง 5% จริงแต่ว่าพูดถึงของเราเหมือนจะตรงข้ามไหมเรามีไอเดียการที่จะทำทำ cover คือจริงๆ cover เราทำได้แต่แค่ว่ามันอาจจะหายากนิดนึงในการที่จะว่าทำให้มันเหมือนต้นฉบับนะส่วนการทำเองของเราอาจจะทำไม่รู้สิแล้วแต่คนนะตำแหน่งอยู่ไม่นานตำแหน่งอยู่ตลอดไป xxwn เนาะโอเคเราไลฟ์มา40 นาทีแล้วอะสถิติรู้สึกเหมือนจะเพิ่มขึ้นไหมเวลาเนี่ยหรือเพราะฉันพูดนานด้วยเกี่ยวไหม เคอืม เราจะไป chapter ที่11กันเลยดีไหมคะนะวันนี้พรีเมียมไม่มาหรอรู้สึกช่วงนี้แบบคนดูปัดขาประจำชั้นหายไปหลายคนนะคะอยู่ดีคาริเจ้าของฉามสมญานามแมลงสาบยังไม่กลับมาหาช่องฉันเลยตั้งแต่ปีใหม่เนี่ยหายไปนานมากจะเป็นเดือนแล้วว่านะโอเคถ้าอย่างนั้นเรามาเริ่ม chapter ที่11กันดีกว่านะคะกับ Quidditch ค่ะก็คือเกม Quidditch นั่นแหละนะมันแปลไม่ได้แล้วล่ะผมก็สงสัยอยู่จริงนะครับสงสัยเหมือนกันวันนี้เราก็คงเอาแค่3 chapter แหละไม่อยากหักโหมตัวเองไปมากกว่านี้นะเดี๋ยวขอดูแป๊บนึงว่า chapter Quidditch เนี่ยมันมีทั้งหมดกี่หน้านะ chapter ที่11มีทั้งหมด15หน้านะคะอันนี้น่าจะน้อยแหละใช่ไหมขอเทียบกับchapter เมื่อกี้แป๊บนึงนะน้อยค่อนข้างน้อยนะโอเคถ้างั้นเราเริ่มที่ chapter 11กันดีกว่านะคะ chapter 11 Quidditch as they entered November the weather turned very cold. The mountains around school became icy gray and the lake like chilled steel. Every morning the ground was covered in frost. Hagrid could be seen from the upstairs window, defrosting broomstick on the Quidditch pitch, bundled up in a long moleskin overcoat, rabbit fur gloves, and enormous beaver skin boots. The Quidditch season had begun. On Saturday, Harry would be playing his first match after weeks of training, Gryffindor versus Slytherin. If Gryffindor won, they would move up into second place in House Championship. Hardly anyone had seen Harry play because Wood had decided that, as a secret weapon, Harry should be kept well secret. But the news that he was playing Seeker had leaked out somehow, and Harry didn't know which was worse. People were telling him he'd be brilliant, or people telling him they'd be running around underneath him, holding a mattress. It was really lucky that Harry now had Hermione as a friend. He didn't know how he'd have gotten through all his homework without her. What with all last-minute Quidditch practice Wood was making them do, she had also lent him Quidditch Through the Ages, which turned out to be a very interesting read. Harry learned that there were 700 ways of committing a Quidditch foul, and that all of them had happened during a World Cup match in 1473. That Seekers were usually the smallest and fastest player, and that most serious Quidditch accidents seemed to happen to them. But that although people rarely died playing Quidditch, referees had been known to vanish and turn up months later in Sahara Desert. Hermione had become a bit more relaxed about breaking rules since Harry and Ron had saved her from the mountain troll, and she was much nicer for it. The day before Harry's first Quidditch match, the three of them were out in the freezing courtyard during break, as she had conjured them a bright blue fire which could be carried around in a jam jar. They were standing with their backs to it, getting warm when Snape crossed the yard. Harry noticed at once that Snape was limping. Harry and Ron and Hermione moved closer together to block the fire from view. They were sure it wouldn't be allowed. Unfortunately, something about their guilty faces caught Snape's eye. He limped over. He hadn't seen the fire, but he seemed to be looking for a reason to turn them off anyway. "What's that you got there, Potter?" "It was Quidditch Through the Ages," Harry showed them. "Library books are not to be taken outside the school," said Snape. "Give it to me. 5 points from Gryffindor." "He just made that rule up," Harry muttered angrily as Snape limped away. "Wonder what's wrong with his legs?" "Don't know, but I hope it's really hurting him," said Ron bitterly. The Gryffindor common room was very noisy that evening. Harry, Ron, and Hermione sat together next to a window. Hermione was checking Harry's and Ron's charms homework for them. She would never let them copy. How will you learn? But by asking her to read it through, they've got the right answers anyway. Harry felt restless. He wanted Quidditch through the ages back, to take his mind off his nerves about tomorrow. Why should he be afraid of Snape? Getting up, he told Ron and Hermione he was going to ask Snape if he could have it. Rather you have me, they said together, but Harry had an idea that Snape wouldn't refuse if there were other teachers listening. He made his way down to the staff room and knocked. There was no answer. He knocked again. Nothing. Perhaps Snape had left the book in there. It was worth a try. He pushed the door ajar and peered inside, and a horrible scene met his eyes. Snape and Filch were inside, alone. Snape was holding his robes above his knees. One of his legs was bloody and mangled. Filch was handling Snape bandages. Blasted thing, Snape was saying. How are you supposed to keep your eyes on me? On all three heads at once. Harry tried to shut the door quietly, but Potter! Snape's face was twisted with fury as he dropped his robes quickly to hide his legs. Harry gulped. I just wonder if I could have my book back. Get out! Out! Harry left before Snape could take any more points from Gryffindor. He sprinted back upstairs. Did you get it? Ron asked as Harry joined them. What's the matter? In a low whisper, Harry told them what he had seen. You know, what does it mean? He finished breathlessly. He tried to get past the three-headed dog at Halloween. That's where he was going when we saw him. He's after whatever is guarding, and I bet my broomstick he let that throw in to create a diversion. Hermione's eyes were wide. No, he wouldn't, she said. I know he's not very nice, but he wouldn't try and steal something Dumbledore was keeping safe. Honestly, Hermione, you think all the teachers are sane or something? Snapped Ron. I'm with Harry. I wouldn't put anything past Snape, but once he's over, what's that dog guarding? Harry went to bed with his head buzzing with the same question. Neville was snoring loudly, but Harry couldn't sleep. He tried to empty his mind. He needed to sleep. He had first Quidditch match in a few hours, but his expression on Snape's face was so Harry sneezing his leg wasn't easy to forget. The next morning dawned very bright and cold. The great hall was full of the delicious smell of fried sausages and the cheerful chatter of everyone looking forward to a good Quidditch match. You've got to eat some breakfast. I don't want anything, just a bit of toast, wailed Hermione. I'm not hungry. Harry felt terrible. In an hour's time, he'd be walking onto the pitch. Harry, you need your strength, said Seamus Finnegan. Seekers are always the one who get nobbled by the other team. Thanks, Seamus, said Harry, watching Seamus pal catch up on his sausage. By 11 o'clock, the whole school seemed to be out in the stands around the Quidditch pitch. Many students had binoculars. The seat might be raised high in the air, but it was still difficult to see what was going on sometimes. Ron and Hermione joined Neville, Seamus and Dean, the West Ham fan up in the top row. As a surprise for Harry, they had painted a large banner on one of the sheets Scabbers had ruined. It said, Potter for President, and Dean, who was good at drawing, had done a large Gryffindor lion underneath. Then Hermione had performed a tricky little charm so that the paint flashed in different colors. Meanwhile, in the changing rooms, Harry and the rest of the team were changing into their scarlet Quidditch robes. Slytherin would be playing in green. Wood cleared his throat for silence. Okay, men, he said. And women, said Chaser Angelina Johnson. And women, Wood agreed. This is it. The big one, said Fred Weasley. The one we've all been waiting for, said George. We know all of our speech by heart, Fred told Harry. We were in a team last year. Shut up, you two, said Wood. This is the best team Gryffindor's had in years. We're going to win, I know it. He glared at them as if to say, or else. It's time. Good luck, all of you. Harry followed Fred and George out of the changing room and hoping his knees weren't going to give way, walked onto the pitch to loud cheers. Madame Hooch was refereeing. She stood in the middle of the pitch, waiting for the two teams, her broom in her hand. Now, I want a nice fair game. All of you, she said, once they were all gathered around her. Harry noticed that she seemed to be speaking particularly to Slytherin captain Marcus Flint, a fifth-year. Harry thought Flint looked as if he had some troll blood in him. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the fluttering banner high above, flashing Potter for President over the crowd. His heart skipped. He felt braver. Mount your broom, please. Harry clambered onto his Nimbus 2000. Madame Hooch gave a loud blast on her silver whistle. 15 brooms rose up high into the air. They were off, and the quaffle is taken immediately by Angelina Johnson of Gryffindor. What an excellent chaser that girl is, and rather attractive too. Jordan? Sorry, Professor? The Weasley twins' friend, Lee Jordan, was doing the commentary for the match, closely watched by Professor McGonagall. And she's really belting along up there. A neat pass to Alicia Spinnet, a good find of Oliver Woods, last year only reserve, back to Johnson, and no. Slytherin have taken the quaffle. Slytherin captain Marcus Flint against the quaffle, and off he goes. Flint flying like eagle up there. He's going no, stop by an excellent move by Gryffindor keeper Wood, and Gryffindor take the quaffle. That's chaser Katie Bell of Gryffindor there. Nice dive around Flint. Off of the field, and ouch! That must have hurt. Hit in the back of her head by Bludger. Quaffle taken by Slytherin. That's Adrian Pusey speeding off towards the goalpost, but he's blocked by a second Bludger. Sent his way by Fred or George Weasley. Gentle Witch, nice play by Gryffindor beater anyway. And Johnson back in possession with the Quaffle. A killer field of area where she goes. She's really flying. Dodges the speeding Bludger. The goalposts are ahead. Come on, now, Angelina. Keeper blithely dives, misses. Gryffindor scores. Gryffindor cheers fill the cold air with howls and moans from Slytherins. Budge up there, move along. Hagrid. Ron and Hermione squeezed together to give Hagrid enough space to join them. Been watching from the hut, said Hagrid, patting a large pair of binoculars around his neck. But it isn't the same as being in a crowd. No sign of snitch yet, huh? Nope, said Ron. Harry hasn't had much to do yet. Keep out of trouble, though, that's something, said Hagrid, raising his binoculars and peering skywards at the speck that was Harry. Way up above them, Harry was gliding over the game, squinting for some sign of snitch. This was part of his and Wood's game plan. Keep out of the way until you catch sight of the snitch, Wood had said. We don't want you to be attacked before you have to be. When Angelina had scored, Harry had done a couple of loop-to-loops to get out his feeling. Now he was back to staring around for snitch. Once he caught a slight flash of gold, but it was just a reflection on one of Weasley's wristwatches. And once a Bludger tried to come pelting his way, more like a cannonball than anything, but Harry dodged it and Fred Weasley came chasing after it. Alright there, Harry, he had time to yell as he beat the Bludger furiously towards Marcus Flint. Slytherin in possession, Lee Jordan was saying. Chaser Pusey ducks to Bludger, to Weasley and Chaser Bell, and speed towards the— Wait a moment, was that the snitch? A murmur ran through the crowd as Adrian Pusey dropped a quaffle, too busy looking over his shoulder at the flash of gold that passed his left ear. Harry saw it. In the great rush of excitement, he dived downwards after a streak of gold. Slytherin seeker Terence Hicks had seen it too. Neck and neck they hurtled towards the snitch. All the chasers seemed to have forgotten what they were supposed to be doing as they hung mid-air to watch. Harry was faster than Hicks. He could see the little round ball's wing fluttering, darting up ahead. He put on an extra sort of speed. Wham! A roar of rage echoed from the Gryffindors below. Marcus Flint had blocked Harry on purpose, and Harry's broom spun off course, Harry holding on for dear life. Foul! Screamed the Gryffindors. Madame Hooch spoke angrily to Flint and then ordered a free shot at the goalpost for Gryffindor. But in all the confusion, of course, the golden snitch had disappeared from sight again. Down in the stands, Dean Thomas was yelling, "Send him off! Red card, red card!" This isn't football, Dean, Ron reminded him. You can't send people off in Quidditch. And what's the red card? But Hagrid was on Dean's side. They ought to change the rules. Flynn could have knocked Harry off the air. Lee Jordan was finding it difficult not to take sides. So after that obvious and disgusting bit of cheating, Jordan, growled Professor McGonagall. After that open and revolting foe, Jordan, I'm warning you. Alright. Flynn nearly kills the Gryffindor Seeker, which could happen to anyone, I'm sure, so a penalty to Gryffindor, taken by Spinnet, who puts it away, no trouble, and we continue to play. Gryffindor is still in possession. It was as Harry dodged another Bludger, which went spinning dangerously past his head, that it happened. His broom gave a sudden frightening lurch. For a split second, he thought he was going to fall. He gripped the broom tightly with both his hands and knees. He'd never felt anything like that. It happened again. It was as though the broom was trying to buck him off, but Nimbus 2000 did not suddenly decide to buck their riders off. Harry tried to turn back towards the Gryffindor goalpost. He had half a mind to ask Wood to call timeout, and then he realized that his broom was completely out of his control. He couldn't turn it, he couldn't direct it at all. It was zigzagging through the air and every now and then making violent switching movements, which almost unseated him. Lee was still commentating. Slytherin in position, Flint for the coffle, past the spinners, past the spell, hit hard in the face by a bludger, hope it broke his nose, only joking Professor. Slytherin scores! Oh no. The Slytherin was cheering. No one seemed to have noticed that Harry's broom was behaving strangely. It was carrying him slowly higher away from the game, jerking and twitching as it went. Don't know what Harry thinks he's doing, Hagrid mumbled. He stared through his binoculars. If I didn't know better, I'd say he lost control of his broom, but he can't have. Suddenly, people were pointing up at Harry all over the stands. His broom had started to roll over and over, with him only just managing to hold on. Then the whole crowd gasped. Harry's broom had given a wild jerk and he swung off it. He was now dangling of it, holding on it with only one hand. Did something happen to it when Flint blocked him? Seamus whispered. Can't have, Hagrid said, his voice shaking. Can nothing interfere with the broomstick except powerful dark magic? No kid could do that to a Nimbus 2000. At these words, Hermione seized Hagrid's binoculars, but instead of looking at Harry, she started looking frantically at the crowd. What are you doing? Moaned Ron, grey-faced. I knew it, Hermione gasped. Snape, looked. Ron grabbed the binoculars. Snape was in the middle of the stand opposite to them. He had his eyes fixed on Harry and was muttering non-stop under his breath. He's doing something. Chasing the broom, said Hermione. What should we do? Leave it to me. Before Ron could say another word, Hermione had disappeared. Ron turned the binoculars back on Harry. His broom was vibrating so hard, it was almost impossible for him to hang on much longer. The whole crowd were on their feet, watching, terrified, as the Weasley crew flew up to try and pull Harry safely onto one of the brooms. But it was no good. Every time they got near him, the broom would jump higher still. They dropped lower and circled beneath him, obviously hoping to catch him if he fell. Marcus Flint seized the quaffle and scored 5 times without anyone noticing. Come on, Hermione, Ron muttered desperately. Hermione had fought her way across the stand where Snape stood and was now racing along the row behind him. She didn't even stop to say sorry as she knocked Professor Quirrell head first into the row in front, reaching Snape, crouched down, pulled out her wand and whispered a few well-chosen words. Bright blue flames shot from her wand onto the hem of Snape's throat. It took perhaps 30 seconds for Snape to realize that he was on fire. A sudden yelp told her she had done her job. Scooping the fire off him into a little jar in her pocket, she scrambled back along the road. Snape would never know what had happened. It was enough. Up in the air, Harry was suddenly able to clamber back on his broom. Neville, you can look, Ron said. Neville had been sobbing into Hagrid's jacket for the last 5 minutes. Harry was speeding towards the ground when the crowd saw him clap his hand into his mouth as though he was about to be sick. He hit the pitch on all fours, coughed, and something gold fell into his hand. I've got a snitch, he shouted, waving it above his head, and the game ended in complete confusion. He didn't catch it, he nearly swallowed it. Flynn was still howling 20 minutes later, but it made no difference. Harry hadn't broken any rules, and Lee Jordan was still happily shouting the results. Gryffindor had won by 170 points to 60. Harry heard none of this, though. He was being made a cup of strong tea back in Hagrid's hut with Ron and Hermione. It was Snape, Ron was explaining. Hermione and I saw him. He was cursing your broomstick, muttering he wouldn't take his eyes off you. Rubbish, said Hagrid, who hadn't heard a word of what had gone on next to him in the stands. Why would Snape do something like that? Harry and Ron and Hermione looked at each other, wondering what to tell him. Harry decided on telling the truth. I found out something about him, he told Hagrid. He tried to get past the 3-headed dog at Halloween. It bit him. We think he was trying to steal whatever is guarding. Hagrid dropped the teapot. How do you know about Fluffy? He said. Fluffy? Yeah, he's mine. By the name of a Greek chappie I met in pub last year. I lent him to Dumbledore to guard the... Yes? Said Harry eagerly. Now don't ask me any more, said Hagrid gruffly. That's top secret, that is. No, don't ask me anymore. But Snape trying to steal it. Rubbish, said Hagrid again. Snape's a Hogwarts teacher. He'd do nothing of the sort. So why didn't he just try and kill Harry? Cried Hermione. The afternoon events certainly seemed to have changed her mind about Snape. I know what jinx when I see one, Hagrid. I read all about them. You've got to keep an eye contact. And Snape wasn't blinking at all. I saw him. I'm telling you, you're wrong, said Hagrid hotly. I don't know why Harry's broomstick act like that. But Snape wouldn't try and kill student. Now listen to me, all three of you. You're meddling in things that concern you. It's dangerous. You forgot that dog, and you forgot what it's guarding. There's been Professor Dumbledore and Nicholas Flamel. Aha, said Harry. So there's someone called Nicholas Flamel involved, is there? Hagrid looking furious with himself. เราก็จบ chapter 11 กันสักทีนะคะก็เป็น chapter ที่ค่อนข้างที่จะเนื้อหาสั้นแต่ก็ค่อนข้างมันดีนะคะก็เราจะมาสรุปความให้ฟังเลยละกันนะคะก็หลังจากที่แฮร์รี่รอนเฮอร์ไมโอนี่เจอประสบการณ์ในห้องน้ำตอนนั้นมาก็ทั้งสามก็เป็นเพื่อนกันโดยปริยายนะคะก็แฮร์รี่ก็รู้สึกว่ามีเฮอร์ไมโอนี่เป็นเพื่อนเนี่ยดีมากเพราะว่าเหมือนมีคนช่วยทำการบ้านให้นะถึงแม้จะบอกว่าไม่ให้ลอกแต่ก็ให้เฮอร์ไมโอนี่ตรวจให้ตลอดพอตรวจให้ก็รู้ว่าคำตอบที่ถูกมันเป็นยังไงประมาณเนี้ยนะก็ถือเป็นเรื่องดีไปนะแล้วก็ช่วงนั้นเนี่ยเป็นช่วงที่ใกล้เข้าสู่เริ่มจะเข้าสู่การแข่งขันควิดดิชแล้วซึ่งเป็นเกมแรกของแฮร์รี่ก็มีการตื่นตระหนกเล็กน้อยประมาณนี้นะพอถึงวันจริงเนี่ยแฮร์รี่ก็แบบว่าไม่รู้จะได้ยังไงนะด้วยความที่คือซิกเกอร์มีหน้าที่แค่ตามหาลูกสนิทอย่างเดียวซึ่งก็คือต้องแบบว่ารอไปนะหลบนู่นนี่นั่นไปประมาณนั้นนะพอเริ่มเกมจริงๆเนี่ยไปมาเนี่ยตอนแรกเหมือนแฮร์รี่เห็นลูกสนิทแล้วนะคือมีความพยายามบินไปแต่ว่าอยู่ดีเนี่ยก็โดนกัปตันของฝั่งซิเทลินนะคะเหมือนบินมาโฉบแล้วก็แบบทำให้แฮร์รี่ล่วงนะซึ่งตอนนั้นก็คือทุกคนตกใจมากแล้วก็แบบว่ามีความพยายามเหมือนแบบว่าอยากให้แบบว่าไล่ไอ้กัปตันซิเทลินออกแต่ว่ามันตามกฎมันออกไม่ได้เนาะแฮร์รี่ก็บ่นว่าทำไมเขาไม่เปลี่ยนกฎเนาะประมาณนั้นสักพักหนึ่งแฮร์รี่ก็กำลังแบบว่าบ่นเบื่ออยู่สักพักหนึ่งอยู่เนี่ยไม้กวาดของแฮร์รี่เนี่ยก็อยู่ดีก็ทำตัวแปลกๆเหมือนสั่นไปมาเหมือนจะเตะแฮร์รี่ออกจากตัวไม้กวาดตลอดจนแฮร์รี่เนี่ยโดนกระเด็นแล้วกำลังจับไม้กวาดอยู่ด้วยมือเดียวคือถ้าหลุดมือคือหล่นแล้วก็ล่วงลงมาตายนะครับประมาณนั้นซึ่งตอนนั้นทุกคนเนี่ยก็ตกใจมากนะแล้วสักพักหนึ่งเนี่ยเฮอร์ไมโอนี่ที่ดูอยู่บนสแตนเนี่ยก็เอากล้องส่องทางไกลของแฮกริดที่กำลังส่องแฮร์รี่เนี่ยมาส่องดูสแตนฝั่งตรงข้ามแล้วก็ค้นพบว่าไอ้ฝั่งตรงนั้นน่ะมันมีศาสตราจารย์สเนปเนี่ยเหมือนกำลังท่องคาถาสักอย่างอยู่พูดไม่หยุดเลยแล้วก็เหมือนตาจ้องไปที่แฮร์รี่หนักมากเฮอร์ไมโอนี่เนี่ยเลยเข้าใจว่าโอเคสเนปน่าจะกำลังสาปแฮร์รี่อยู่หรือเปล่านะก็เลยวิ่งตรงไปที่สแตนฝั่งตรงข้ามแล้วก็เอาดวงไฟที่เธอมีเนี่ยเสกก็คือเผาเสื้อคลุมของสเนปนะให้มันไหม้สักนิดหนึ่งจนสเนปเนี่ยเสียสมาธินะทำให้แฮร์รี่เนี่ยกลับมาควบคุมไม้กวาดได้นะเฮอร์ไมโอนี่ก็ทำเหมือนไม่มีอะไรเกิดขึ้นนะสักพักนึงเนี่ยพอแฮร์รี่เนี่ยกลับเข้ามาควบคุมไม้กวาดได้สักแป๊บนึงเนี่ยแฮร์รี่เนี่ยก็สามารถจับลูกสนิทได้โดยมันเข้าไปอยู่ในปากของแฮร์รี่เลยนะและกริฟฟินดอร์ก็ชนะไปถึงแม้ว่ากับตอนของฝั่งซิทิลินแม่งจะบอกว่าแต่เขาไม่ได้จับมันนะเขากินมันไปเลยอะไรเงี้ยก็คือข้อหน้าแบบว่าไอ้นี่นิดนึงแต่ว่าก็ไม่มีใครสนใจเพราะว่าตามกฎมันก็ได้เหมือนกันนะทุกคนก็ดีใจมากอะไรอย่างนี้นะสักพักหนึ่งพอฉลองกันเสร็จเนี่ยแก๊งเนี่ยแฮร์รี่รอนเฮอร์ไมโอนี่เนี่ยก็ไปดื่มชาที่กระต๊อบของแฮกริดนะแล้วเขาก็เล่าให้ฟังเหมือนกับว่าเขาไปเจออะไรแปลกๆมาเพราะว่าในช่วงก่อนหน้านั้นเนี่ยในช่วงก่อนหน้านั้นที่ว่ามันมีช่วงก่อนหน้านั้นที่แฮร์รี่รอนเฮอร์ไมโอนี่เนี่ยออกมานั่งเล่นที่ปราสาทแล้วเหมือนสเนปเห็นพอดีก็เลยเข้ามาแล้วก็เหมือนยึดหนังสือแฮร์รี่ไปเพราะว่านั่นไม่สามารถเอาหนังสือจากห้องสมุดมาได้ทั้งที่จริงๆเป็นหนังสือของเฮอร์ไมโอนี่หรือเปล่าไม่มั่นใจนะก็เลยคือแฮร์รี่เนี่ยจะไปที่ห้องออฟฟิศเพื่อเหมือนไปขอหนังสือคืนแต่ว่าไม่มีใครตอบก็เลยเหมือนสารแนเปิดประตูไปก็เห็นสเนปเนี่ยกำลังทำแผลอยู่กับพาโลงนะแล้วก็เหมือนพูดถึงว่าเป็นแผลที่ได้มาจากไอ้หมา3 หัวที่มาจากห้องนั้นนะแฮร์รี่ก็เลยเอาเรื่องนี้ไปเล่าให้แฮกริดฟังว่าสเนปเนี่ยต้องไปขโมยของอะไรในห้องนั้นแน่ๆแต่แฮกริดก็บอกว่าอย่าไปสนใจแฮกริดไม่สเนปไม่ทำอย่างนั้นแน่นอนและสเนปไม่น่าใช่คนสาปด้วยเพราะแฮร์รี่ก็บอกไปอย่างนั้นแต่ว่าแฮกริดก็เหมือนตัดตกไปว่าไม่ใช่แน่นอนแล้วก็บอกว่าอย่าไปยุ่งเรื่องห้องนั้นเพราะว่าคนที่รู้เรื่องนี้มีแค่ดัมเบิลดอร์กับนิโคลัสฟาร์เมลก็คือบอกว่าอย่าไปยุ่งแต่ก็เผลอหลุดปากออกมาอยู่ดีนะและแฮกคือแบบว่าอารมณ์เสียพี่กูพูดไปทำไมวะนะก็คือทำให้แก๊งแฮร์รี่เนี่ยได้เบาะแสมาใหม่ก็คือว่าไอของที่อยู่ในห้องนั้นเนี่ยมันมีเกี่ยวข้องกับบุคคลที่ชื่อว่านิโคลัสฟาร์เมลนะคะก็เป็นสรุปความของบทที่11นะคะก็เป็นประมาณนี้นะ นะเออโอเคก่อนหน้านี้ผมแอบไปฟัง Attack on D มารู้สึกน้ำตาซึมจากข้างในอ่ารู้สึกวันนี้ค่อนข้างเงียบเหงาเนาะวันนี้แบบค่อนข้างเงียบเหงาเลยอะนะเออคือน้องโมเดลจะหายไปไหนเนี่ยเฮ้ยทำไมน้องโมเดลชื่อเหลือแค่นั้นวะงงมากแม่โอเคเนาะเราไปต่อกับ chapter ที่10เราไปต่อกับ chapter ที่12กันเลยได้ไหม chapter สุดท้ายของวันนี้ละนะเดี๋ยวแป๊บนึงนะรู้สึกว่าวันนี้ค่อนข้างเงียบเหงาโอเคมาขอดูก่อนว่า chapter ที่12เนี่ยมีทั้งหมดกี่หน้านะคะวันนี้เราเล่าเสร็จเราจะลงไลฟ์เลยนะเราจะไม่อยู่ฟรีทอล์กเพราะว่าเราไม่รู้จะทำอะไรแล้วจริง chapter ที่12มีทั้งหมด22หน้านะคะโอ้ยาวเลยนะคะโอ้ยรู้สึกเมื่อยปากเลยนะคะเนี่ยเนาะงั้นเดี๋ยวก่อนเราจะไปเล่า chapter ที่12เราขอพูดนอกเรื่องแล้วกันฉันเนี่ยได้ลงตารางของสัปดาห์หน้าแล้วแต่ยังไม่ได้โพสต์นะแค่ว่าลงตารางไว้เฉยๆคือฉันขอพูดเลยแล้วกันว่าฉันเบื่อ Minecraft Survival มากเลยเปิดซีรีส์ไปครับใหม่นะคะแต่ว่าจะเป็น Minecraft แบบไหนก็ไว้ดูอีกทีนะคะแต่ว่าเป็น Minecraft ซีรีส์ใหม่แล้วก็ฉันก็เปิดซีรีส์ใหม่อีกเหมือนกันก็คือแบบดีสวอมที่ฉันเล่นระบบนั่นแหละนะเปิดเป็นซีรีส์เลยนะแต่ว่าจะทำอะไรก็แล้วแต่นะส่วนฮาร์ทโทเปียกับอ่านนิยายอยู่เหมือนเดิมนะส่วนแต่งนิยายยูราโตฮิคารุเนี่ยก็เลื่อนมาก็ยังอยู่เหมือนเดิมนะฮะโอเคเนาะวันนี้เราจะไลฟ์อยู่กันแค่ชั่วโมงครึ่งนะอาจจะไม่ถึง2ชั่วโมงเพราะว่าท่านอ่านแค่นี้พอนะรู้สึกเมื่อยคอแล้วจริงนะแป๊บนึงนะขอดูก่อน13, 14, 15, 16 13, 14, 15 16, 17ได้แหละคิดว่าเราก็น่าจะมีทั้งหมด6เอพิโซดแหละของแฮร์รี่เล่ม1นะคิดว่าน่าจะอย่างนั้นนะคะถ้างั้นไม่ให้เสียเวลาค่ะเราเริ่มกันที่เราไปต่อที่ chapter สุดท้ายของวันนี้กันดีกว่านะคะก็คือ chapter ที่12นะคะ The Mirror of Erised หรือกระจกแห่งกระจก Erised นั่นเองนะมาเริ่มกันเลยดีกว่านะเงียบขนาดนี้ไม่ลงไม่เหลือ เนาะ Chapter 12 The Mirror of Erised Christmas was coming. One morning in mid-December, Hogwarts woke to find itself covered in several feet of snow. The lake froze solid, and the Weasley twins were punished for bewitching several snowballs, so that they followed Quirrell around, bouncing off the back of his turban. The few owls that managed to battle their way through the stormy sky to the deliver post had to be nursed back to health by Hagrid before they could fly off again. No one could wait for holidays to start. While the Gryffindor common room and the Great Hall had roaring fires, the drafty corridors had become icy and a bitter wind rattled the windows in the classroom, while Professor Snape closes down in the dungeon, when their breath rose in the mist before them, and they kept close as possible to the hot cauldrons. "I do feel so sorry," said Draco Malfoy, one potion's class, "for all those people who have to stay at Hogwarts for Christmas because they're not wanted at home." He was looking over at Harry as he spoke. Crabbe and Goyle chuckled. Harry, who was measuring out powdered spine of lionfish, ignored them. Malfoy had been even more unpleasant than usual since the Quidditch match. Disgusted that Slytherin had lost, he had tried to get revenge and get everyone laughing at how White Mother Tree Frog would be replacing Harry as Seeker next. Then he realized that nobody found this funny, because they were all so impressed though at the way Harry had managed to stay on his bucking broomstick. So Malfoy, jealous and angry, had gone back to taunting Harry about having no proper family. It was true that Harry wasn't going back to Privet Drive for Christmas. Professor McGonagall had come round a week before, making a list of students who would be staying for the holidays, and Harry had signed up at once. He didn't feel sorry for himself at all. This would probably be the best Christmas he'd ever had. Ron and his brothers were staying too, because Mr. and Mrs. Weasley were going to Romania to visit Charlie. When they left the dungeons at the end of potions, they found a large fir tree blocking the corridor ahead, two enormous feet sticking out at the bottom, and a loud puffing sound told them that Hagrid was behind it. "Hi, Hagrid. Want any help?" Ron asked, sticking his head through the branches. "Nah, I'm alright, thanks, Ron." "Would you mind moving out of the way?" came Malfoy's cold drawl from behind them. "Are you trying to earn some extra money, Weasley? Hoping to be the gamekeeper yourself when you leave Hogwarts, I suppose? That hut of Hagrid's must seem like a palace compared to what your family used to." Ron dived at Malfoy just as Snape came up the stair. "Weasley!" Ron let go of the front of Malfoy's robes. "He was provoked, Professor Snape," said Hagrid, sticking his huge fairy face from behind the tree. Malfoy was insulting his family. Be that as it may, fighting is against Hogwarts rule, Hagrid," said Snape silkily. 5 points from Gryffindor. Weasley, and be grateful it isn't more. Move along, all of you." Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle pushed roughly past the tree, scattering needles everywhere and smirking. "I'll get him," said Ron, grinding his teeth at Malfoy's back. "One of these days, I'll get him." "I hate them both," said Harry, Malfoy, and Snape. "Come on, cheer up. It's nearly Christmas," said Hagrid. "Tell you what, come and see me in the Great Hall. Look, it's the treat." So Harry, Ron, and Hermione followed Hagrid and his trio to the Great Hall, where Professor McGonagall and Professor Flitwick were busy with Christmas decoration. "Ah, Hagrid, the last tree. Put it in the far corner, would you?" The hall looked spectacular. Festoons of holly and mistletoe hung all around the walls, and no fewer than 12 towering Christmas trees stood around the room, some sparkling with tiny icicles, some glittering with hundreds of candles. "How many days you got until your holidays?" Hagrid asked. "Just one," said Hermione, "and that reminds me. Harry, Ron, we've got half an hour before lunch. We should be in the library." "Oh yeah, you're right," said Ron, tearing his eyes away from Professor Flitwick, who had golden bubbles blossoming out his wand and was trailing them over to the branches of new tree. "The library," said Hagrid, following them out of the hall. "Just before the holidays? Bit keen, aren't ya?" "Oh, we're not working," Harry told them brightly. "Ever since you mentioned Nicholas Flamel, we've been trying to find out who he is." "You what?" Hagrid looked shocked. "Listen here, I told you, drop it. It's nothing you know what's the dog garden. We just want to know who Nicholas Flamel is. That's all," said Hermione. "Unless you'd like to tell us and save us the trouble," Harry added. "We must have been through hundreds of books already, and we can't find him anywhere. Just give us a hint. I know I've read his name somewhere." "I'm saying nothing," said Hagrid fatly. Just have to find out for ourselves then, said Ron, and they left Hagrid looking disgruntled and hurried off to the library. They had indeed been searching for books for Flamel's name, ever since Hagrid had let it slip, just because how else they were going to find out what Snape was trying to steal? The trouble was, it was very hard to know where to begin, not knowing what Flamel might have done to get himself into a book. He wasn't in the great wizards of 28th century, or notable magical names of our time. He was missing, too, from important modern magical discoveries and the study of recent development in wizardry. And then, of course, there was the sheer size of the library, tens of thousands of books, tens of thousands of shelves, hundreds of narrow rows. Hermione took out a list of subjects and titles she had decided to search, while Ron strolled off down a row of books and started pulling them off the shelves at random. Harry wandered over to the restricted section. He had been wondering for a while if Flamel wasn't somewhere in there. Unfortunately, you needed a specially signed note from one of the teachers to look in any of these restricted books, and he knew he'd never get one. These were books containing powerful dark magic never taught at Hogwarts, and only read by older students studying advanced defense against the dark arts. "What are you looking for, boy?" "Nothing," said Harry. Madam Pince the librarian brandished a feather duster at him. "You better get out, then. Go on, out." Wishing he'd been a bit quicker at thinking of some story, Harry left the library. Ron and Hermione had already agreed they would not ask Madam Pince where they could find Flamel. They were sure she'd be able to tell them, but they couldn't risk Snape hearing what they were up to. Harry waited outside in the corridor to see if the other two had found anything, but he wasn't very hopeful. They had been looking for a fortnight, after all, but they only had odd moments between lessons. It wasn't surprising they found nothing. What they really needed was a nice long search without Madam Pince breathing down their necks. 5 minutes later, Ron and Hermione joined him, shaking their heads. They went off to lunch. "You will keep looking while I'm awake, won't you?" said Hermione. "And send me an owl if you find me anything. And you could ask your parents if they know who Flamel is," said Ron. "It'd be safe to ask them." "Very safe, as they're both dentists," said Hermione. Once the holidays had started, Ron and Harry were having too good time to think much about Flamel. They had the dormitory to themselves, and the common room was far emptier than usual, so they were able to get the good armchairs by the fire. They sat by the hour eating anything they could, spear on a toasting fork, bread, crumpets, marshmallows, and plotting ways of getting Malfoy expelled, which were fun to talk about even if they wouldn't work. Ron also started teaching Harry wizard chess. This was exactly like Muggle chess, except that the figures were alive, which made it a lot like directing troops in a battle. Ron's set was very old and battered, like everything else he owned. It had once belonged to someone else in his family. In this case, his grandfather. However, old chessmen weren't a drawback at all. Ron knew them so well that he never had trouble getting them to do what he wanted. Harry played with chessman Seamus Finnegan had lent him, and they didn't trust him at all. He wasn't a very good player, yet they kept shouting different bits of advice at him, which was confusing. "Don't send me there. Can you see his knight? Send him. We can't afford to lose him." On Christmas Eve, Harry went to bed looking forward to the next day for all the food and fun, but not expecting any presents at all. When he woke early next morning, however, the first thing he saw was a small pile of packages at the foot of his bed. "Happy Christmas," said Ron sleepily as Harry scrambled out of bed and pulled on his dressing gown. "You too," said Harry. "Will you look at this? I've got some presents." "What did you expect? Turnips?" said Ron, turning to his own pile, which was a lot bigger than Harry's. Harry picked up the top parcel. It was wrapped in thick brown paper and scrawled across. It was "To Harry from Hagrid." Inside was a roughly cut wooden flute. Hagrid had obviously with it himself. Harry blew it. It sounded a bit like an owl. A second, very small parcel contained a note. "We received your message and enclosed your Christmas present from Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia." Sellotaped to note was a 50-pence piece. "That's friendly," said Harry. Ron was fascinated by the 50 pence. "Weird," he said. "What a shape. This is money?" "You can keep it," said Harry, laughing at how pleased Ron was. "Hagrid and my aunt's uncle. So, who sent these?" "I think I know who that one's from," said Ron, going a bit pink and pointing a very lumpy parcel. "My mom I told her you didn't expect any presents and... Oh no, he groaned. She's made you a Weasley jumper. Harry had torn open the parcel to find a thick, hand-knitted sweater in emerald green and a large bag of homemade fudge. Every year she makes us a jumper, said Ron, unwrapping his own, and mine's always maroon. That's really nice of her, said Harry, trying the fudge, which was very tasty. His next present also contained sweets, a large box of chocolate frogs from Hermione. This left only one parcel. Harry picked it up and felt it. It was very light. He unwrapped it. Something fluid and silvery gray went slithering into the floor, where it lay in gleaming folds. Ron gasped. I've heard of those, he said in a hushed voice, dropping the box of every flavored beans he got from Hermione. Is that what I think it is? They're really rare and really valuable. What is it? Harry picked the shiny, silvery cloth off the floor. It was strange to the touch, like water woven into material. It's an invisibility cloak, said Ron, a look of awe on his face. I'm sure it is. Try it on. Harry threw the cloak around his shoulder and Ron gave a yell. It is. Look down. Harry looked down at his feet, but they had gone. He dashed to the mirror. Sure enough, his reflection looked back at him, just his head suspended in midair, his body completely invisible. He pulled the cloak over his head and his reflection vanished completely. There's a note, said Ron suddenly. A note fell out of it. Harry pulled off the cloak and seized the letter, written in narrow, loopy writing he had never seen before, with the following word. Your father left this in my possession before he died. It is time it was returned to you. Use it well. A very Merry Christmas to you. There was no signature. Harry stared at the note. Ron was admiring the cloak. I'd give anything for one of these, he said. Anything. What's the matter? Nothing, said Harry. He felt very strange. Who had sent the cloak? Had it really once belonged to his father? Before he could say or think of anything else, the dormitory door was flung open and Fred and George Weasley bounded in. Harry stuffed the cloak quickly out of sight. He didn't feel like sharing it with anyone else yet. Merry Christmas! Hey, look, Harry's got a Weasley jumper too. Fred and George were wearing blue jumpers, one with a large yellow F on it, the other with a large yellow G. Harry's better than ours though, said Fred, holding up Harry's jumper. She obviously makes more of an effort if you're not family. Why aren't you wearing yours, Ron? George demanded. Come on, get it on, they're lovely and warm. I hate maroon, Ron moaned half-heartedly as he pulled it over his head. You haven't got a letter on yours, George observed. I suppose she thinks you don't forget your name. But we're not stupid. We know we're called Gret and Forge. What's all this noise? Percy Weasley stuck his head through the door, looking disapproving. He had clearly come halfway through unwrapping his present as he, too, carried a lumpy jumper over his arm, which Fred seized. Peace for prefect. Get it on, Percy. Come on, we're all wearing ours, even Harry got one. I don't want, said Percy thickly, as his twin forced the jumper over his head, knocking his glass askew. And you're not sitting with the prefects today either, said George. Christmas is time for family. They frog marched Percy from the room, his arm pinned side by side by his jumper. Harry had never in all his life had such a Christmas dinner. 100 fat roast turkeys, mountains of roast and boiled potatoes, platters of fat chipolatas, tureens of buttered peas, syrup, bowls of thick, rich gravy and cranberry sauce, and stacks of whistled crackers every few feet along the table. These fantastic crackers were nothing like the feeble Muggle ones the Dursleys usually bought, with their little plastic toys and flimsy paper hats. Harry pulled a whistled cracker with Fred, and it didn't just bang. It went off with a blast like a cannon and engulfed them in all cloud of blue smoke, while from the inside exploded a rear admirer's hat and several live white mice up upon the high table. Dumbledore had swapped his pointy wizard hat for a flowered bunny, and was chuckling merrily at the joke Professor Flitwick had just read him. Flaming Christmas pudding followed the turkey. Percy nearly broke his teeth on a silver sickle embedded in his slice. Harry watched Hagrid getting redder and redder in the face as he called for more wine, finally kissing Professor McGonagall on the cheek, who, to Harry's amazement, giggled and blushed on her top hat lopsided. When Harry left the table, he was laying it down with a stack of things out of the crackers, including a pack of non-explodable luminous balloons, a grow-your-own words kit, and his own new wizard chess set. The white mice had disappeared and Harry had a nasty feeling they were going to end up at Mrs. Norris' Christmas dinner. Harry and the Weasleys spent a happy afternoon having a fierce snowball fight in the grounds. Then, a cold wet gasping for breath, they returned to fire in Gryffindor common room, where Harry broke his new chess set by losing spectacularly to Ron. He suspected he wouldn't have lost so badly if Percy hadn't tried helping him so much. After a tea of turkey sandwiches, crumpet, trifle, and Christmas cake, everyone felt too full and sleepy to do much before bed, except sit and watch Percy chase Fred and George all over Gryffindor Tower because they'd stolen his prefect badge. It had been Harry's best Christmas day ever, yet something had been nagging at the back of his mind all day. Not until he climbed into bed was he afraid to think about it. The invisibility cloak, and whoever had sent it. Ron, full of turkey and cake and with nothing mysterious to bother him, fell asleep almost as soon as he'd drawn the curtains on his four-poster. Harry leaned over the side of his own bed and pulled the cloak out from under it. His father's. This had been his father's. He let the material flow over his hand, smoother than silk, light as air. Use it well, the note had said. He had to try it now. He slipped out of bed and wrapped the cloak around himself. Looking down at his legs, he saw only moonlight and shadows. It was a very funny feeling. Use it well. Suddenly, Harry felt wide awake. The whole of Hogwarts was open to him in this cloak. Excitement flooded through him as he stood there in the dark and silence. He could go anywhere in this, anywhere, and Filch would never know. Ron grunted in his sleep. Should Harry wake him? Something held him back. His father's cloak. He felt it this time, the first time. He wanted to use it alone. He crept out of the dormitory, down the stairs, across the common room, and climbed through the portrait hole. Who's there? Scolded the fat lady. Harry said nothing. He walked quietly down the corridor. Where should he go? He stopped, his heart racing, and thought. Then it came to him, the restricted section in the library. He'd be able to read as long as he liked, as long as it took to find out who Flamel was. He set off, drawing the invisible cloak tight around him as he walked. The library was pitch black and very eerie. Harry lit a lamp to see his way along the rows of books. The lamp looked as if it was floating along mid-air. Anyone thought Harry could feel his arms supporting it. The sight gave him the creeps. The restricted section was right at the back of the library. Stepping carefully over the rope which would separate this book from the rest of the library, he held up his lamp to read the titles. They didn't tell him much. Their peeling, faded gold letters spelled words in language Harry couldn't understand. Some had no title at all. One book had a dark stain on it that looked horribly like blood. The hairs on the back of Harry's neck prickled. Maybe he was imagining it, maybe not. But he thought a faint whispering was coming from the books, as though they knew someone who was there who shouldn't be. He had to start somewhere, setting the lamp down carefully on the floor. He looked along the bottom shelf for an interesting looking book. A large black and silver volume caught his eye. He pulled it out with different difficulty because it was very heavy, and, balancing on his knee, let it fall open. A piercing, blood-curdling shriek split the silence. The book was screaming. Harry snapped it shut, but the shriek went on and on, one high, unbroken, ear-splitting note. He stumbled backward and knocked over his lamp, which went out at once. Panicking, he heard footsteps coming down the corridor outside. Stuffing the shrieking book back on the shelf, he ran for it. He passed Filch almost in the doorway. Filch, pale, wide-eyed, looked straight through him, and Harry slipped under Filch's outstretched arm and streaked off up the corridor, the book's shriek still ringing in his ear. He came to a sudden halt in front of a tall suit of armor. He had been so busy getting away from the library, he hadn't paid attention to where he was going. Perhaps because it was dark, he didn't recognize where he was at all. There was a suit of armor near the kitchens, he knew, but he must be 5 floors above there. You asked me to come directly to you, Professor, if anyone was wandering around at night, and somebody's been in the library, restricted section. Harry felt the blood drain out of his face. Wherever he was, Filch must know a shortcut, because his soft, greasy voice was getting nearer, and to his horror, it was Snape who replied. The restricted section? Well, they can't be far, we'll catch them. Harry stood rooted to the spot as Filch and Snape came around the corner ahead. They couldn't see him, of course, but it was a narrow corridor, and if they came much nearer, they'd knock right into him. The cloak didn't stop him from being solid. He backed away as quietly as he could. A door stood ajar to his left. It was his only hope. He squeezed through it, holding his breath, trying not to move it. And to his relief, he managed to get inside the room without their noticing anything. They walked straight past Harry, and Harry leaned against the wall, breathing deeply, listening to their footsteps dying away. That had been close, very close. It was a few seconds before he noticed anything about the room he had hidden in. It looked like a disused classroom. The dark shades of desks and chairs were piled against the wall, and there was an upturned waste paper basket, but it propped against the wall. Facing him was something that didn't look as if it belonged there, something that looked as if someone had just put it there to keep it out of the way. It was a magnificent mirror, as high as the ceiling, with an ornate gold frame, standing on the two clawed feet. There was an inscription carved on the top. Eriset stra eru yod ube kafru oid on wusi. His panic fading now that there were no sound of filch save. Harry moved nearer to the mirror, wanting to look at himself but see no reflection again. He stepped in front of it. He had to clap his hand to his mouth to stop himself from screaming. He whirled around. His heart was pounding so far more furiously than when the book had screamed, for he had seen not only himself in the mirror, but a whole crowd of people standing right behind him. But the room was empty. Breathing very fast, he turned slowly back to the mirror. There he was, reflected in it, white and scared looking, and by there, reflected by him, were at least 10 other Harry looked over his shoulder. But still, no one was there. Or were they all invisible too? Was he in fact in a room full of invisible people, and this mirror's trick was that it reflected them, invisible or not? He looked in the mirror again. A woman standing right behind his reflection was smiling at him and waving. He reached out a hand and felt the air behind them, as if she was really there. He touched her. Their reflections were so close together, but he only felt air. She, on the other, only exists in the mirror. She was a pretty woman. She had dark red hair, and her eyes are just like mine, Harry thought, edging a little closer to the glass. Bright green, exactly the same shape, but then he noticed that she was crying, smiling, but crying at the same time. The tall, thin, black-haired man standing next to her put his arms around her. He wore glasses, and his hair was untidy. It stuck up at the back, just like Harry's did. Harry was so close to the mirror now that his nose was nearly touching that reflection. "Mom?" he whispered. "Dad?" They just looked at him, smiling, and slowly, Harry looked into the faces of other people in his mirror and saw other pair of green eyes like his, other noses like his, even a little old man who looked as though he had Harry's knobbly knees. Harry was looking at his family for the first time in his life. The Potter smiled and waved at Harry, and he stared hungrily back at them, his hand pressed against the glass as though he was hoping to fall right through it and reach them. He had a powerful kind of ache inside of him, half joy, half terrible sadness. How long he stood there, he didn't know. The reflection did not fade, but he looked around until he saw a distant noise brought him back to his senses. He couldn't stay here. He had to find his way back to bed. He tore his eye away from his mother's face. "I'll come back," he whispered, and hurried from the room. "You could have woken me up," said Ron crossly. "You can come tonight. I'm going back. I want to show you the mirror." "I'd like to see your mom and dad," said Ron said eagerly. "And I want to see all your family, all the Weasley. You're going to show me your other brothers and everyone." "You can see them any old time," said Ron. "Just come round my house this summer. Anyway, maybe it only shows dead people. Shame we're not finding Flammo, though. Have you had some bacon or something? Why aren't you eating anything?" Harry couldn't eat. He had seen his parents and would be seeing them again tonight. He had almost forgotten about Flammo. It didn't seem very important anymore. Who cared what a three-headed dog was guarding? What did it matter if Snape stole it, really? "Are you alright?" said Ron. "You look odd." What Harry feared the most was that he might not be able to find the mirror room again. With Rod covered in their cloak too, they had to walk much more slowly next night. They tried retracing Harry's route from the library, wandering around the dark passageway for nearly an hour. "I'm freezing," said Ron. "Let's forget it and go back." "No," Harry hissed. "I know it's here somewhere." They passed the ghost of a tall witch gliding in the opposite direction, but saw no one else. Just as Ron started moaning that his feet were dead with cold, Harry spotted a suit of armor. "It's here, just here, yes." They pushed the door open. Harry dropped the cloak around his shoulders and ran to the mirror. There they were. His mother and father beamed at the sight of him. See? Harry whispered. I can't see anything. Look at them all. There are lots of them. I can only see you. Look in it properly. Go on, stare where I am. Harry stepped aside, but with Ron in front of the mirror. He couldn't see his family anymore, just Ron in his paisley pajamas. Ron, though, was staring transfixed at his image. Look at me, he said. Can you see all your family standing you? No, I'm alone, but I'm different. I look older, and I'm head boy. What? I am wearing badge like Bill used to, and I'm holding a house cup and a Quidditch cup. I'm Quidditch captain too. Ron tore his eyes away from the splendid sight to look excited at Harry. Do you think these mirrors show the future? How can it? All my family are dead. Let me have another look. You had it to yourself last night. Give me a bit more time. You're only holding the Quidditch cup. What's interesting about that? I want to see my parents. Don't push me. A sudden noise outside in the corridor put an end to the discussion. They hadn't realized how loudly they'd been talking. Quick! Ron threw the cloak back over them as luminous eyes of Mrs. Norris came back down the door. Ron and Harry stood quite still, both thinking the same thing. Did the cloak work on cats? After what seemed like an age, she turned and left. This isn't safe. She might have gone for Filch. I bet she heard us. Come on. And Ron pulled Harry out of the room. The snow hadn't melted next morning. Wanna play chess, Harry? Said Ron. No. Why don't we go down with Hagrid? No, you go. I know what you're thinking about, Harry. That mirror. Don't go by tonight. Why not? I don't know. I just got a bad feeling about it, anyway. You've had too many close shaves already. Filch, Snape, and Mrs. Norris are wandering around. So what if they can see you? What if they walk into you? What if you knock something over? You sound like Hermione. I'm serious, Harry. Don't go. But Harry only had one thought in his head, which was to get back into the mirror, and Ron wasn't going to stop him. The third night, he found his way more quickly than before. He was walking so fast he knew he was making more noise than wise. But he didn't meet anyone, and there were his mother and father smiling at him again, and one of his grandfathers nodding happily. Harry sank down to sit on the floor in front of the mirror. There was nothing to stop him staying here all night with his family. Nothing at all, except... So, back again, Harry? Harry felt as though his inside had turned to ice. He looked behind him. Sitting on one of the desks by the wall was none other than Albus Dumbledore. Harry must have walked straight past him, so desperate to get to the mirror. He hadn't noticed him. I didn't see you, sir. Strange how short-sighted being invisible can make you, said Dumbledore, and Harry was relieved to see that he was smiling. So, said Dumbledore, slipping off the desk to sit on the floor with Harry, you, like hundreds before you, have discovered the delights of the Mirror of Erised. I didn't know what it was called that, sir, but I expect you've realized by now what it does. It shows me my family, and it showed your friend Ron himself as head boy. How do you know? I don't need a cloak to become invisible, said Dumbledore gently. Now, can you think what the Mirror Erised shows at all? Harry shook his head. Let me explain. The happiest man on earth would be able to use the Mirror of Erised like a normal mirror. That is, he would look into it and see himself exactly as he is. Does that help? Harry thought and said slowly, It shows us what we want. Yes and no, said Dumbledore quietly. It showed us nothing more or less than the deepest, most desperate desire of our hearts. You, who have never known your family, see them standing around you. Ronald Weasley, who had always been overshadowed by his brothers, sees himself standing alone, the best of all of them. However, this mirror will give us neither knowledge nor truth. Men have wasted away before it, entranced by what they have seen, or have been driven mad, not knowing what it shows is real or even possible. The mirror will be moved into a new home tomorrow, Harry, and I ask you not to look for it again. If you ever do run across it, you will now be prepared. It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live. Remember that. Now, why don't you put on that admirable cloak and get back to bed? Harry stood up. Sir, Professor Dumbledore, can I ask you something? Obviously, you've just done so. Dumbledore smiled. You may ask me one more thing, however. What do you see when you look in the mirror? I see myself holding a pair of thick woolen socks. Harry stared. One can never have enough socks, said Dumbledore. Another Christmas had come and gone and I didn't get a single pair. People will insist on giving me books. It was only when he was back in bed that it struck Harry that Dumbledore might not have been quite truthful, but he thought, as he shoved scabbards of his pillow, it had been quite a personal question. แล้วสุดท้ายก็จบสักทีนะคะสำหรับ chapter ที่2หรือ Mirror of Erised นะซึ่งบทนี้เป็นบทที่ยาวที่สุดแล้วในวันนี้นะก็ chapter สุดท้ายของเรานี่แหละนะเดี๋ยวเรามาสรุปความให้ฟังกันนะคะ chapter เนี่ยจะเล่าถึงหลังจากที่เหตุการณ์มันคริสใช่ไหมก็จะเป็นช่วงวันคริสต์มาสแล้วนะซึ่งแฮร์รี่เนี่ยก็ไม่ได้กลับไปที่บ้านนะด้วยความที่บ้านที่แฮร์รี่อยู่เลยที่เป็นตระกูลเดอร์ซี่ก็เป็นบ้านที่ค่อนข้างจะเหี้ยนะคะก็เลยไม่อยากกลับไปก็อยู่กับรอนนี่แหละเพราะว่ารอนก็อยู่นะซึ่งตอนนั้นเนี่ยก็แฮร์รี่เนี่ยก็ได้ของวันคริสต์มาสเนี่ยคราวนี้ก็ได้ของขวัญมากมายนะคะซึ่งแฮร์รี่เนี่ยได้ของขวัญชิ้นหนึ่งมาเป็นผ้าคลุมล่องหนซึ่งแฮร์รี่ใส่ก็ล่องหนจริงๆนะซึ่งคนที่ส่งมาเนี่ยเป็นใครก็ไม่รู้เพราะไม่ได้เซ็นชื่อไว้นะแล้วแฮร์รี่ก็ได้รับสารจากในจดหมายฉบับนั้นว่าใช้มันให้ดีใช้มันให้เกิดประโยชน์ที่ดีอะไรอย่างนี้นะซึ่งแฮร์รี่ก็นึกขึ้นได้ว่าทำไมไม่เอาไปนี่ล่ะเพราะว่าช่วงนั้นเนี่ยเป็นช่วงที่ทุกคนกำลังหาข้อมูลเรื่องนิโคลัสฟาร์เมลอยู่นะก็เลยแบบว่าแฮร์รี่เนี่ยก็เอาผ้าคลุมล่องหนเนี่ยตอนกลางคืนนะใส่ผ้าคลุมล่องหนไปแล้วก็แอบไปที่ส่วนต้องห้ามของห้องสมุดนะคือในห้องสมุดของฮอกวอตส์เนี่ยมันจะมีส่วนหนึ่งที่เป็นส่วนที่ห้ามนักเรียนเข้าไปคือถ้าจะเข้าไปหาข้อมูลนี้เนี่ยต้องมีใบอนุญาตจากคุณครูนะซึ่งแฮร์รี่เนี่ยก็แอบเข้าไปตอนกลางคืนนะก็ไปหาดูนะสักพักนึงเนี่ยกลายเป็นว่าอยู่ดีๆเนี่ยเผลอไปหยิบหนังสืออันนึงซึ่งมันเป็นหนังสือที่ส่งเสียงดังมากทำให้แฮร์รี่ตกใจและทำให้คือตอนนั้นแฮร์รี่ถือตะเกียงมาด้วยนะพอตกใจปุ๊บแฮร์รี่เนี่ยทำตะเกียงหลุดมือแล้วไฟก็ดับทำให้อยู่ดีเนี่ยเหมือนจะมีคนเหมือนพาโลงอ่ะมันจะมาแฮร์รี่ก็รีบหนีมาเนี่ยดันพบว่าเหมือนแฮร์รี่เหมือนพาโลงเนี่ยมันไปตามสเนปมานะแฮร์รี่ก็เลยแพนิคแล้วก็หนีไปอีกเข้าไปอยู่ห้องหนึ่งเป็นห้องที่เหมือนเป็นห้องเรียนที่ไม่ได้ใช้แล้วนะและที่นั่นเนี่ยแฮร์รี่ก็ได้พบกระจกบานหนึ่งนะซึ่งในนั้นเนี่ยแฮร์รี่พบเห็นพ่อแม่ตัวเองแล้วก็ครอบครัวตัวเองเนี่ยกำลังยืนอยู่และแฮร์รี่รู้สึกแบบประหลาดใจมากที่ได้เจอนะตอนแรกแฮร์รี่นึกว่าเป็นคนจริงๆแต่ว่าพอแบบว่าพยายามจับมือหรือจับอะไรก็ไม่รู้สึกก็เห็นแค่ในกระจกนะพอวันต่อมาเนี่ยแฮร์รี่เอาไปเล่าให้รอนฟังรอนก็อยากไปด้วยแล้วคืนนั้นรอนก็ได้ไปกับแฮร์รี่นะซึ่งตอนแรกเนี่ยแฮร์รี่นึกว่ารอนจะเห็นครอบครัวตัวเองเหมือนกันแต่ว่าสิ่งที่รอนเห็นก็คือรอนเนี่ยได้เป็นทั้งประธานนักเรียนแล้วก็เป็นทั้งแบบว่ากัปตันของทีมควิดดิชแล้วก็ถือถ้วยประจำบ้านด้วยนะซึ่งแฮร์รี่ก็งงว่าทำไมแต่ละคนเห็นไม่เหมือนกันนะแล้วพอผ่านมาวันที่3เนี่ยแฮร์รี่เนี่ยก็เหมือนพยายามยังติดใจในกระจกนั้นอยู่แต่รอนก็เหมือนบอกว่าอย่าไปใส่ใจอะไรมากอะไรอย่างนี้ประมาณนั้นนะพอในคืนวันนั้นเนี่ยแฮร์รี่ก็ได้กลับไปที่ห้องนั้นเหมือนเดิมไปส่องกระจกเหมือนเดิมคือส่องดูเข้าตัวเองนั่นแหละสักพักหนึ่งอยู่ดีมีเสียงไล่มาจากข้างหลังนะคะคือเป็นเสียงของดัมเบิลดอร์ที่นั่งดูแฮร์รี่มาโดยตลอดโดยที่แฮร์รี่ไม่รู้ตัวนะแฮร์รี่ก็เลยบอกว่าไม่รู้อยู่ตรงนี้ดัมเบิลดอร์ก็อธิบายว่ากระจกเนี้ยคือกระจกของแอริเซตนะซึ่งสวัสดีคุณพรีเมียมนะคะที่เข้าสู่เสียงของเลสเตอร์คุณในวันนี้นะคือคุณพรีเมียมมาตอนเราจะลงไลน์แล้ววะคือเราจะสรุปความเสร็จแล้วก็จะลงไลน์แล้วว่าคุณพรีเมียมมาแบบว่าจุเวลามากนะคะเมื่อทำงานเสร็จ I just came back okay but you came back when I'm going to end the live like 5 minutes ago okay สื่อความต่อนะดัมเบิลดอร์ก็อธิบายนะคะว่ากระจกแห่งแอริเซนเนี่ยเป็นกระจกที่จะแสดงสิ่งที่คนนั้นเนี่ยปรารถนามากที่สุดซึ่งก็บอกแฮร์รี่ประมาณว่าอย่าไปใส่ใจกระจกนี้มันไม่มีความเป็นจริงนะอย่าไปอะไรมากเดี๋ยวพวกนี้เนี่ยไอ้กระจกนี้ก็จะอยู่ที่อื่นแล้วอย่าไปตามหามันเลยนะอะไรอย่างนี้นะงั้นต่อ5 ทุ่มไม่ต่อแล้วนะวันนี้จบ3 chapter แล้วนะก็แต่เสร็จก็จะลงแล้วเนี่ยนะพอแฮร์รี่ได้รู้ว่ามันเป็นกระจกไงคืออันนี้ขอเสริมนิดนึงว่าคำว่า Erised ในภาษาอังกฤษเนี่ยที่สะกดว่า ERISED เนี่ยถ้าสะกดกลับหลังเนี่ยจะสะกดว่า DESIRE ซึ่งอ่านว่า desire ซึ่งแปลว่าความปรารถนาซึ่งมันเป็นการเล่นคำที่รู้สึกว่าฉลาดมากถึงมันจะโง่ๆก็เถอะเพราะว่า desire ถ้า Erised กลับหลังก็เหมือนเวลาเราส่องกระจกภาพมันจะกลับหลังใช่ไหมนั่นแหละ Erised กลับหลังเป็น desire นะก็ถือว่าเป็นการเล่นคำที่ฉลาดดีนะคะประมาณนั้นนะ แล้วพอแฮร์รี่รู้ความจริงปุ๊บก็โอเคแล้วก็เลยมีการถามดัมเบิลดอร์ไปว่าแล้วดัมเบิลดอร์เห็นอะไรในกระจกแต่ดัมเบิลดอร์ก็บอกไปว่าเห็นเป็นมีเห็นเป็นฉันถือถุงเท้าอยู่เป็นคู่อะไรอย่างนี้เพราะดัมเบิลดอร์ก็บ่นว่าฉันไม่เคยได้ถุงเท้าเป็นคู่เลยมีคนไหนให้หนังสือฉันอะไรอย่างนี้แฮร์รี่ก็เลยรู้สึกว่าดัมเบิลดอร์น่าจะตอแหลแหละเพราะแต่ว่าก็ไม่ได้แคร์อะไรมากเพราะว่าเหมือนฉันถามเยอะเกินไปอะไรอย่างนี้นะแล้วก็จบการอ่านของเราในวันนี้สักทีนะคะเดี๋ยวตอนสัปดาห์หน้าเราจะมาต่อ chapter ที่13 14 15นะแล้วอีกสัปดาห์หนึ่งเราก็จะต่อ16 17แล้วเราก็จะจบบทเราจะจบเล่ม1สักทีนะคะหลังจากที่ผ่านระยะเวลามาเป็นเดือนนะคือสถิติเนี่ยแค่นี้ก็อ่านนานแล้วนะก็เวลาอีก15 นาทีจะ5 ทุ่มแต่ว่าเราจะลงไลฟ์เลยนะเพราะว่าเรานี่ไม่รู้จะทำอะไรอ่ะ15 นาทีมันไม่มีอะไรอยู่แล้วเนาะถ้างั้นก็เราลงไลฟ์เลยแล้วกันนะคะวันนี้รีบไปนะโอเคถ้างั้นก็ไว้พบกันใหม่นะคะบ๊ายบายคุณพรีเมียมฝันดีคุณนายฝันดีคุณคลาวด์ X Cloud นะคะวันนี้คนมาน้อยอ่ะฉันใส่แว่นกรองแสงฉันไม่สามารถใส่หูฟังได้เพราะว่าหูฟังมันเป็นหูฟังแบบครอบซึ่งมันจะกดขอบซึ่งมันกดขาแว่นฉันซึ่งแม่งโคตรเจ็บนะคะคือถ้าฉันไม่เลือกว่าฉันไม่ฟังเพลงฉันก็ต้องเลือกที่จะแบบเสียสายตานะแต่ฉันเลือกฟังเพลงอยู่ดี